Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. This is an open Q&A live stream. I will start, I'm afraid, with a couple of very quick apologies. If you were looking for a live stream last week and it didn't happen, that's simply because I was traveling and I seriously underestimated how jet lagged I would be, and I seriously overestimated how good the Wi-Fi would be where I was. So that's why that didn't happen. And secondly, this was planned to be a charity live stream. I'm really keen to do as many charity live streams as I possibly can on this channel. Unfortunately, having moved to the new channel, there are a few hoops I need to go through with YouTube before they will allow me to do charity live streams. I am jumping through those hoops as quickly as I possibly can. So as soon as I can, then we will make the very next live stream a charity one. Okay. That out of the way, this is an open Q&A. So we've got questions from our patrons on A Song of Ice and Fire. We've got questions about Lord of the Rings. We've got questions about The Witcher and a few other random things as well. So this is a chance to just ask those questions that maybe didn't fit into the last few videos that I've been doing, but I'll try and arrange them very broadly. We'll do A Song of Ice and Fire questions first, then we'll go on to the Lord of the Rings, then we'll do The Witcher and everything else. So hopefully that all makes sense. Dilly-dally too much, let's go straight into the questions. Starting off, A Song of Ice and Fire. This is from Zakharok saying, during his last chapter in A Dance with Dragons, Jaime Lannister follows Brienne after she lures him with a lie. It's very surprising from Brienne, who is the best representation of knighthood. Why do you think she agreed to do this for him? So, yeah, the situation here that we see is that she arrives late in the day. They've gone to Pennytree. Jaime's at Pennytree, which for those who've read Dunk and Egg a few times will immediately ring a bell. This is where Sir Arlen of Pennytree, Dunk's the knight that Dunk served as a squire, that's where he came from. And he's basically on this tour of the Riverlands, reclaiming them or claiming them for the Lannisters. The war has gone the Lannisters' way in the Riverlands. Robb and the Northern Army have been defeated. They've retreated. The Red Wedding has happened. Everyone's gone back up to the north, and now the Lannisters are claiming the Riverlands. And he's going from castle to castle to claim them. He ends up at Pennytree, and while he's there, Brienne comes to him. And Brienne says to him, I've found Sansa. And Sandor Clegane has got Sansa. She's about a day's ride away. Come with me, but you have to come alone or the Hound will kill her. So Jaime trusts her. Of course he trusts her, and they head off. That's the last we see of Jaime or Brienne in A Song of Ice and Fire. Now, this is obviously completely out of character for Brienne to just come up and lie to Jaime's face. She is an incredibly honorable character. So what's going on? Well, the context here is that she has to do this because she had previously been caught by Lady Stoneheart, who was going to kill her and also Pod, who is her squire at this point. And the only way to save him is to basically go along with Lady Stoneheart for a while. She has to, in order to save a purely innocent person, she has to go against her honor. It's love over honor. And so I think these things, the fact this is a Pennytree and this love over honor idea, these are the clues that we have as to what's really going on. Because yes, this is outside of her normal character. The first thing I think is to take the Dunk link. The Dunk link is they're obvious. George R. R. Martin deliberately put them in Pennytree to make us think of Dunk, and Brienne is Dunk's descendant. This is pretty much confirmed now by George R. R. Martin. The hints are so strong. He is her don't know what it would be, great-grandfather perhaps. And when we look at their two characters, they are an echo one of another. They are the true knight, and yet both of them are technically not knights. Dunk technically was not knighted. Brienne is a woman and therefore cannot be knighted. So they represent all of the beauty and honor of what knighthood should be, the true knight, and yet they are not actually knights. The echo here is that Dunk lives with this lie he told. We read, particularly in The Hedge Knight, the first book, we read about it several times. He just feels this great guilt about this lie that he told. The lie being that he is actually a knight. Brienne is also now lying. This is the echo we're getting. So George R. R. Martin is giving us a thematic echo of what's going on, as well as a practical reason. That this is the second point. The practical reason is love over honor or duty. This is a theme which resounds throughout A Song of Ice and Fire. We associate it particularly with Ned, who again and again and again chooses love for his family over honor and duty. People see him as this honorable, dutiful man, but really every time he has to choose, when it's with Lyanna, when it's with Sansa, he chooses his family. He chooses love. He chooses to protect and save the people he loves over what people might think is duty or honor. And this theme is over in Maester Aemon, it's with Jon, here it's with Brienne. This is a huge theme in these books. So that's the second thing. The third thing that's going on, I think, and we'll probably see this played out a little bit more, is that there's an echo also. Jaime and Brienne have this sort of a parallel. You know that there's a link between the two of them. Jaime admitted to Brienne in a way that he's not really admitted to anyone before. He admitted to Brienne and Brienne only about the thing that everybody thinks broke his honor. He was a kingslayer. He's an oath breaker. He killed King Aerys. But actually, the reality is underneath, he did that because he was protecting people. He did that for the very best of reasons. The whole world will castigate him and point fingers and say, you're a kingslayer. But he knows he did it for the right reasons. And this, in a much smaller way, is what's going on with Brienne here. Because Brienne is giving up her honor to Jaime. Jaime will hate her. Jaime will go, what? You lied to me? I thought you wouldn't lie to me. Because she is saving Pod. Now, and the really important echo here is that actually when Jaime thinks about it, and this is, Zachalock, your second part of this question, how Jaime will handle it, I think he will understand. I think he will understand, and I think it will deepen the bond between them, because he will look at this and go, I know why you did this. You did this because you were trying to save a life. And that, I think, will accelerate the deepening of the bond between them. Because at the moment, yes, there's a connection, but we need to see this bond between the two of them strengthen and deepen over time. You also asked about how he might escape Lady Stoneheart. And whether we'll see a parallel to the conversation that they had in the prison in River Run. I think yes. The dynamic between these three is really that there are so many bonds and promises made between them. She releases Jaime because he promises that he's going to do the prisoner swap with Sansa and Arya. Jaime then passes that on. He cannot do this, so he passes that on to Brienne. Brienne has also got her promises with Catelyn Stark. And so this triangle of promises is just going to play out. And I do wonder whether he is going to have to prove himself somehow to her, show that his loyalties have shifted, because they have. In this last book, what we've had with Jaime again and again is that he's been moving further and further away from the Lannisters. You see it in these chapters each time when he's taking a different castle for the Lannisters. He's not really thinking about it being for the Lannisters. When it starts snowing, he looks at the snow and he thinks, I wonder how my father would handle this. And then he thinks he'd probably let everyone starve. I don't want to do that. And then Cersei sends him this letter basically saying, I need you to be my champion. Come back, run back to King's Landing and help me. And he rips it up and throws it away. He's turning his back on House Lannister. This is going to be the next step in him turning his back on House Lannister. Whether that will last, that's another question entirely. But in this part of Jaime's arc, he is turning his back on House Lannister, and he will prove his worth in some way. You did also ask Zacharok about whether, when The Winds of Winter, Dream of Spring come out, we might be disappointed because all of our great plans and theories are just too intricate. Maybe the answers are going to be just normal and boring ones. What if Benjen is just dead? What if Ramsay just wrote the pink letter? Am I worried? I'm not worried, actually, because I think that George R. R. Martin, two reasons. Firstly, I think George R. R. Martin is an excellent writer, and it may well be that these working hypotheses, theories, whatever that we've got, a large number of them are wrong. I dare say quite a few of them are. I dare say quite a few of the things that I've been saying here over the last few years will turn out to be wrong. But I think that, firstly, he will come out with good stories, regardless of whether we were right or wrong. And secondly, for me personally, and I've said this before many times, I'm not living or dying by my theories. I'm just giving you what I think is the best understanding that we all have of what the truth is of this story going forward. I'm not going to stand up and shout out how wonderful I was and how many theories I got right if I got them right. Similarly, I'm not going to tear my hair out and rent my clothes if I get a lot of them wrong. I will simply go and say, this is right, this is wrong, this is now what I think the story is going forward. So, yeah, I'm not worried. I'm really looking forward to it as and when that ever happens. Okay, let's go to the chat. Had a few questions in the chat. Roman Lakovitz saying, lately I haven't been able to follow your content as closely as I would like, but I try to catch up whenever I can. Well, absolutely not a problem at all. I want to yet again thank you for your great work and to give you a couple of pennies. Well, Roman, I hugely appreciate that. Thank you very much. Martin S. saying, Wheel of Time Season 2 is supposed to premiere in a couple of hours. Non-spoiler review from a YouTube channel claims it is much better than the fairly disappointing Season 1, but still different from the books. Yeah, I've not had any... I mean, I've not asked for it, so why would I? But I've not had any inside information on Season 2. I've not seen Season 2 yet of The Wheel of Time. The non-spoiler reviews that I've seen have been generally positive for the first few episodes. They've come from Wheel of Time people, so I would expect them to be generally positive. I enjoyed Season 1. I think I'm in the slightly weird position with Wheel of Time, which is that I've read the books. I like the books. But I wouldn't say that I'm as deep into them as I am Song of Ice and Fire, Lord of the Rings, things like that. So I can see there are changes. I can see they have made quite a few changes in Season 1, but that doesn't impact on me as personally as it does with things like Lord of the Rings or A Song of Ice and Fire. In fact, whisper it, but I actually thought some of the best bits of Season 1 of The Wheel of Time were the new bits. Well, my personal opinion. Anyway, I'm looking forward to Season 2. I thought Season 1 dealt with a lot of story and crushed it into quite a small number of episodes, bit of screen time, whilst adding in new material, which did skip out and leave a huge amount. The Wheel of Time, for those who do not know, has got I don't know whether to say it has a problem looming on the horizon. Is probably the wrong way of saying it, but there are, I think, 13 books in the Wheel of Time series, and they are big books. They're all quite chunky fantasy books, and they're not going to go for 13 seasons. With the best will in the world, those characters have to stay looking roughly the same sort of age. They're not going to go for 13 seasons. So they will have to contract it to a certain degree. Even the showrunner, I've heard him say that there's a lot you can take out. Books, I don't know, 6 to 9-ish. Fans will admit as well, there's a lot you could take out. The pace slows significantly in the middle section of the Wheel of Time. So we're on season 2, and season 2 is broadly covering the third book in the series. So what, looking forward, it's going to be even more contracted is the point I'm trying to make. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited. I'm not this time around, maybe next time around, because they are currently filming season 3. I'm not currently making new Wheel of Time content. I might be persuadable if I enjoy season 2. So keep an eye out for that. Let's go to a question from Julia Zeda saying, thank you for seeing me through medical school, moving to a new country and my first job as a junior doctor. Immensely grateful for your marvellous content. Much love from Scotland. Well, I mean, congratulations. They sound like fantastic things. I don't know where you moved from. If you've moved to Scotland, it's a beautiful country. And congratulations on becoming a junior doctor. That sounds like you're making a wonderful contribution. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. And did I have one more question? Oh, Derry's read it before, saying, macro question. This is about A Song of Ice and Fire. George R. R. Martin has said that the others were inspired by the high she with tricksiness of Fae in mind. How important is the wording of the pact and the oaths of the night watch? Oh, that's interesting. Right, so for those who are slightly less versed on ancient, I mean, it's sort of Celtic, they may well have come from other influences as well, but this is where I access the she are what we might think of as elves in a way, but they live in a different dimension. They come in, there's a lot of baby swapping that's going on. There's a lot of when you say tricksiness, it's like agreeing a bargain with a mortal, but then you're so sticking to the exact wording of the bargain in a way that fools everybody. If you think of someone, and I don't think he's ever described as a she, but think of Rumpelstiltskin, that kind of vibe, then that's where you're coming from. So was he inspired by this? Yes. Now we need, as book readers, we need to get the TV show kind of idea of the others out of our head for one moment. When George R. R. Martin is talking about the others, they are beautiful. They are icy. They are a different civilization. They are intelligent. And they're not just here. It's very clear they're not just here to kill everyone. That's not the idea. So what does that mean? You've suggested that perhaps there's something to do with the oaths of the Night's Watch or the wording of the pact. For this kind of metaphor to work, if he is looking at the she and saying that they're playing on some words and going to the word of a contract in a way that we're not expecting them to, then that would need to be an agreement with them. So the pact is an agreement between the children of the forest and the first men. And the oaths of the Night's Watch, or the Night's Watch oath, is something which is done by members of the Night's Watch, neither of which are made to the others themselves. So I really like the thinking. You're absolutely on the right lines, I think, in terms of how we should view them. But I don't think in terms of those specific examples that's right. So what I think that when we're talking about the she, when we're talking about what the others are like, what we should therefore expect is when we're learning more from them, they are going to give us more layers than we're expecting. This isn't just I'm going to go and kill lots of people. This is these things happened in the past. This is what we're attempting to achieve. This is how we're going to go and do it. But in an otherworldly way that we do not completely understand. So that is the kind of feel that I think George R. R. Martin is going for with this. And I genuinely think that the Winds of Winter, when we get it, the Winds of Winter is when we're going to get this breakthrough in understanding of what's going on with the others, because we haven't got that in the books so far. It's really frustrating. On the TV show, we kept on getting from, I don't know when it was, like season 4 onwards, kept on getting more and more chances to see the White Walkers in action. In the books, we've had the prologue to book 1. We've had a couple of encounters where we get Sam, a little bit of rumor here and there, and that's pretty much it. We've still not got huge amounts to go on. So this next book, and the reason why I think this next book will be the time we start to learn more, is that a throwaway comment that George R. R. Martin made when he was slightly less guarded about his comments was that in the Winds of Winter, we will go further north than we ever have so far. Now, it's an entirely different question. How and through whose POV we might go further north, but going further north means finding out about the others. It's not just about where they are now, because where they are now is south of the furthest north that we've experienced them. That was the Fist of the First Men. They've moved south of that. If we're going further north than ever before, then that means we're learning about their homeland or something along those lines. So yeah, really interesting questions. I really should get back to doing a few more videos about the others at some point. So yeah, well, I will get to that. Your last great night. What do you think will happen to Cersei? She seems to be going mad. With Kevin and Pycelle dead, that will only exacerbate her anger towards the Tyrells. Yeah, so I would, if you want to look at what's happening or what will happen with Cersei, I highly recommend you look at this last, the epilogue chapter from A Dance with Dragons, which is the one we always think about it as being, this is the chapter where Varys kills Kevin Lannister. But that's just the tip of the iceberg of what's going on here. We see Kevin Lannister going on. Kevin Lannister basically is just being competent, a sensible leader in King's Landing, which is why, as Varys says, he killed him. Varys basically says, no, it's not personal. I just think you're being competent, and I don't want a competent person in charge of King's Landing right now. So he goes and he meets various people. He has a small council meeting, and we see Cersei through this. And what we see is her, they're debating what to do about money, and she basically says, well, we should just tax everyone. They're debating what to do with food, and she basically says, well, let's just take food off of everyone. A chapter or so, or a little bit earlier than that, actually, we saw her looking at wildfire, and Jaime thinks, or in fact says to her, that she is looking at it the same way that the Mad King looked at wildfire. Then at the end of this epilogue chapter, we get this moment where Varys basically explains, he does a little bit of monologuing, bless him, at the end, Varys, and he basically says, okay, so nobody will suspect me because they don't know where I am. But what I'll do is I'll like drop a couple of Tyrell coins somewhere, and probably somebody will blame them. So what's going to happen? Cersei, we know, has a huge grudge against the Tyrells. And then Kevin Lannister dies. She's always thinking, what would my dad do? Because she thinks, this is what I have to do in order to be a leader. She's always trying to prove herself. And what would Tywin do if Kevin Lannister was killed? He would just go on the offensive and murder absolutely everybody who did it. If she thinks, and Varys is going to drop some evidence there, if she thinks it was the Tyrells, she is going to go all out to kill the Tyrells. So this is where this idea that maybe when we combine this with the focus on wildfire, maybe something similar to what happened on the show with the blowing up the Great Sept with the wildfire will happen in the books. That's where I think we're going with this. Further down this line, all of the echoes here are of Rhaenyra in King's Landing, where finally she gets to rule. If you think all the way back to the Dance of the Dragons, probably spoilers here for House of the Dragon, but this is what happens in the books. Whether they go with this on the show or not, I do not know. But when she does take King's Landing, then they've not got any money. They're in the middle of a war. What does she do? Raises the taxes. Very clearly and ostensibly kills all of the people who oppose her. This is where Cersei's going. What happened to Rhaenyra? She gets run out of King's Landing. What's going to happen to Cersei? She's going to get run out of King's Landing. Particularly when someone like Aegon VI, Fagon, Young Griff, whatever we call him, he is coming to King's Landing with an invading army, and he seems like this shining example of what a monarch should be. So that, I think, is what is happening to Cersei. She's going to make all of the wrong decisions when she gets into power, and she will get pushed out of King's Landing. Martin S. saying, I agree with what you say about the Wheel of Time, except there are 14 books, not counting the prequel New Spring. Apologies, 14 books, not 13. But yes, the mid-series is slow. Yeah, I mean, saying, I should probably clarify, I didn't before, saying that the middle section of the Wheel of Time is slow is not controversial, and it's also not a slight on the fandom, even in the slightest. I was lucky enough a couple of years ago, I think it was, to be at the premiere for the Wheel of Time season 1. They showed us the first couple of episodes like a day or two before they aired, and the showrunner was there, and there was a Q&A, and he said something along the lines of, and of course, yeah, there's quite a lot we could cut from the middle. And I was there in amongst the real hardcore Wheel of Time fans, and they were all laughing at that. Everybody who's read the Wheel of Time accepts the fact that the middle section, you could trim a little bit. Right, let's go to, I've got another question from Paul Taylor saying, hello, Robert. Thank you. Oh, Ty Frack and Daniel Abraham, writers of the Expanse novels, are proteges of George. George R. R. Martin. They write in POV chapters and garden their characters through role play. Will they write any Westeros? So while George R. R. Martin is alive, I firmly believe that other than TV shows and maybe the stage play, the only person who is writing books about Westeros is George R. R. Martin. He doesn't seem to be minded to let other people into his world. He has got a shared world, Wildcards world, that he's very passionate about, but in the world of Ice and Fire, no, that's his baby. So while he's alive, no. The question, which, I mean, I don't like going into this territory, but, you know, we do have to be honest, is what happens if he does die before he finishes these stories. And he had previously said that he wasn't wanting anyone else to finish off his stories, but he seems to have relaxed on that position a little bit now. He's when Robert Jordan dies, and we were talking about the Wheel of Time when Robert Jordan died and Brandon Sanderson took over for the last 3 books. He seemed okay with that. He went on record a couple of times and basically said, yeah, Robert Jordan knew he was going to die. He knew he'd only got a few months or so. He wrote it all out, all of the information, and then Brandon Sanderson took it over and wrote it. And if you've, incidentally, if you've not read them, the way that worked was that Brandon Sanderson wrote the last 3 books in his style. He didn't pretend to be Robert Jordan. This is quite interesting because when you actually get into writing styles, he didn't pretend to be Robert Jordan. He wrote it as Brandon Sanderson, but he wrote it 100% devoted to what Robert Jordan had written. And George R. R. Martin seemed to be okay with that as a concept if a writer knows that he's got a certain, he will be passing soon. And also, a couple of years ago, George R. R. Martin, he had, if you read his blog, where sometimes he talks about A Song of Ice and Fire, a lot of the times he's talking about all the other things that he's interested in or some other random things that are going on in his life. He has mentioned a couple of years ago, he had a really bad run of friends who died. And he wrote about it quite passionately. It was quite sad, actually, when you think of it. It was sort of during the pandemic, but I didn't get the impression they were all related to COVID. But anyway, he had, as sometimes happens, he had a long period of every couple of months somebody that he knew died. And one of those was a writer. And he did say on his Not a Blog, he did say, I hope somebody gets to finish off this story that I know that he was writing. So I think he has now moved to a situation where he believes when he dies, if he has not finished A Song of Ice and Fire, or perhaps if he's not finished Dunk and Egg, then he would be okay with somebody else finishing it off for him. The only issue is, at the moment, it's all up there. It's all in his head. He hasn't shared really... I was going to say with anyone, it's you may decide how scary a thought you think this is. I think, to the best of my knowledge, the only people that he's actually sat down for a significant amount of time and described the end of his story to are the showrunners of Game of Thrones, Dan and Dave. What they did with that is a different issue. We'll actually come on to that in a question later. But he hasn't told his wife. He's not gone through in detail with his wife. His other writing friends, he's not gone through in detail. His assistants in writing, he operates with a few different people when he's sat there writing. It's not just him alone in a room. He does have people who help him with various things. They don't know all the details of what's going to be happening, so it's all up here. So he would need to get that written down. But Tyfrak and Daniel Abraham, in terms of The Expanse, just to come back to the original question, I've not read the Expanse novels, but everybody I know who has read them, whose view I respect, says that they are excellent. So there would definitely be quite a long queue, I suspect, of people who would be potentially interested in finishing it off. Maura Lee, hi there. Maura saying, just to show of love, admiration and support, thank you for the great content, stories and merch. You are loved. Hugs to Dan, your handsome dog. Well, yeah, I was giving Dan a lovely hug before he went off to bed as well. Right, let's go to a question from Mars of House Bars. And Maura, sorry, I should say, hugely appreciate your support. So great to see you. Mars of House Bars. Hi, Robert. How you? Hope you're doing well. I am, thank you. More of a hypothetical question, but I was wondering, in A Game of Thrones, if Jon Snow had escaped the Night's Watch and made it down south to help Robb, wouldn't Robb have to behead Jon as an oathbreaker? Do you think Robb would have actually been able to kill Jon? So this is, if you remember, in book 1, Robb, he gets this whole series of news coming through, because the world is changing as he's there training to become a member of the Night's Watch. Ned Stark is killed. Robb Stark goes to war, and he's there. What am I doing, sitting up here at the wall? I need to be with Robb. I need to go and help. I need to go and join up. And he gets on his horse and he rides off, and his friends catch wind of it, and they head off, try and catch him. And basically, Ghost, his direwolf, stops him. He is expecting his direwolf to be like silent. Normally, Ghost is silent, riding alongside him, but Ghost deliberately makes a lot of noise, and that's when Jon's friends find him and capture him and bring him back. So that's what happened. But what if he'd managed to escape? Well, I mean, it's quite a tricky one. Legally, would Robb have had to behead him? That's what he should have done. Practically, I mean, we'd have had to see. This is probably going to be another one of those love versus honor issues that we see again and again in this series. It would not have surprised me, because there is a loophole here that very few people seem to have kind of figured out in this series. There is a clear loophole that Jon could have gone down, helped Robb out, and if Robb wins, then he decides, well, what shall I do? Jon, you've come and helped me, but you're clearly on the run from the Night's Watch. You've broken your vows, and you should be beheaded. So I hereby sentence you to death. Here comes the loophole. But I have decided instead to send you up to the Night's Watch. And so he just goes back up. So theoretically, that's what could have happened, and it wouldn't have surprised me if that's what did. I think that we would have seen this love versus honor thing with Robb as well. Okay, let's go to a question from Johnny Targs. Do you think Diran II is the son of Aegon the Unworthy or Aemon the Dragon Knight? Okay, so this is going back. We covered these characters a few live streams ago, back in the series on Targaryen rulers. Aegon IV was Aegon the Unworthy. Now, he had affairs all over the place. Aemon the Dragon Knight, holy and pure member of the Knight's Guard. However, he very clearly was in love with Aegon's true wife. Now, what was to happen of this? They had a son. She had a son, Diran. Now, from relatively early on, Aegon had his suspicions, because Aemon and his wife were close, very, very close. And he never explicitly came out and said, this boy is a bastard. This is not my true-born son. But as he got older, more and more often, he would be quite loose in how he was saying this, and it became very clear. Everybody knew that this was what he thought. Did he have any evidence? Because we're not given the evidence. In the world of Ice and Fire, we're not given the evidence. Maybe if we ever get Fire and Blood Part 2, we will get more evidence on this, and we'll be able to come to a clear, definitive decision. But we do not, as it stands, have huge amounts of evidence. We do know that some random knight, whose name I forgot, it might have been a Corgil, someone like that, accused her of adultery, and Aemon immediately leapt to her defense, and they fought a trial by combat, and Aemon won. And so, in the sight of the gods, she was proven innocent. Now, legally, she was in the clear. They were in the clear. In real terms, that doesn't prove anything except for the fact that Aemon the Dragon Knight was a good swordsman, which we know. So, is it Is it possible? It's obviously possible. Is it certain? No, we don't have any absolute evidence. Is it likely? I mean, I put it at 50-50. The question is whether Aemon is as holy as they as the stories would have us believe. Now, it's Diran as a person seems definitely to have inherited more from the supposed father than the as in Aemon than Aegon. Is that instructive? Not particularly. There are also people where you could go and look at Duncan Egg in the Mystery Night. You can also, if you're looking for evidence, you can see that Bloodraven a couple of times refers to Diran as his cousin rather than his great nephew, which technically is not right unless he's a bastard. So was that Bloodraven just being accurate, or was it just being loose with language? Either thing is possible. As I say, I put it 50-50. I genuinely don't think we've got the evidence to say one way or the other. It's a strong case. What we do know is that Aegon seems to have believed it, because he never felt he had the evidence to outright say so. But even his deathbed legitimizing of all of his bastards does hint that maybe he thinks that that his heir is not actually his son, because it's not just, otherwise you're going into the realms of why did he do that? He did that just because he wanted to cause some chaos. Maybe he did that because actually he thought that Diran wasn't the true heir. Maybe we see all of this Blackfire coverage in Duncan Egg from the perspective, well, most of the time we see it from the perspective of the side who won, but maybe Aegon IV actually had a point. Maybe he didn't want Diran to inherit, but he just could never quite bring himself to say so. It's a really intriguing question. We don't know, but there's a lot of evidence out there. Andrew K saying, didn't Aegon IV basically start those rumours, though? That threatens the credibility for me. He hated what the Dragon Knight represented and how honoured and respected he was. Yeah, he did. As far as we understand, he started those rumours that led to the accusation, that led to the trial by combat. So I think you could take that either way. Maybe he's just like randomly talking about stuff. Maybe this trial by combat was actually pushed for by Aemon because he thought, hey, here's this opportunity that I can kill that guy nice and easily, and then all of these rumors will be gone. I don't think that tells us one way or the other. Personally, I don't think that tells us one way or the other how likely it is to be true. Let's go to Martin S. This is Lord of the Rings question. I'll quickly pick this one up, but I'll try to do the Lord of the Rings question second and do a Song of Ice and Fire first, but I'll quickly pick up this one. What do you think the Witch King looked like as a man before getting his ring from Sauron, i.e. before becoming Nazgul? Well, we're not really told, but the clear implication is that he was a Númenórean. He was a Númenórean lord. So what do I think he looked like? I think he was tall. Númenóreans were tall. I think that he was strong. I think that he was lordly. So I think that's probably about as far as we can go in terms of a physical description. Right, let's go to a question from Diego Godoy saying, Hola, Robert. Hola. Do you think we will see another comet in the remaining 2 books of A Song of Ice and Fire? Do you think the preternatural events that began the seasons being out of order could be linked to a comet? Okay, let's do comet talk. the preternatural event, this, for those who haven't picked up on this, this is the wording on the first ever, the blurb on the back of the first edition of the first book of A Song of Ice and Fire. The blurb that was agreed by George R. R. Martin. So what that says when they're trying to say none of Game of Thrones hadn't happened, no one knew anything. George R. R. Martin was just a rando writer of fantasy fiction, sometimes science fiction. He's got a new book out. What should we put on the back? What it says is a preternatural magical event long ago in the past has set the seasons out of balance, and then it goes on. That is the starting sentence. That is the thing that George R. R. Martin agreed to put on the back of his book to entice people in, and it has to have come from him, because that's not written anywhere in book one. That didn't come from a rando editor who just thought, oh, that seems to be the theme of this book, I'll write it on the back. That is not what it says in book one. This is what George R. R. Martin wrote. So a preternatural, a magical event has put the seasons out of balance. Is that a comet? I think the answer is no, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't a comet. Now, comets clearly in A Song of Ice and Fire, as in much of sort of fantasy fiction more broadly, these are signs. George R. R. Martin loves this comet that he has that appears at the end of book one, the beginning of book two. If you read the end of book one, the beginning of book two, it's something ridiculous, like 8 or 9 chapters in a row that the comet is mentioned. A character stares at the comet and thinks, what does this mean? Because everybody knows this must mean something. They stare at it and go, what does this mean? Who does this apply for? What does this portend? And each character has their own thoughts on what this might mean. Now, that was a portent for what's going to happen in the series, but specifically for Dany bringing the dragons to life. That is what that is. Now, could the comet have been a portent for what happened to make the preternatural event? Absolutely. I think there probably was a comet which was up there. Magic coming from above somehow is very much a sort of a classic high fantasy concept. This idea of the comet being a portent of something significant is definitely very clear. The event which made the seasons go out of balance has to be in some way some huge magical event that does things. He's been very clear that we shouldn't be looking for scientific answers to this. So people keep on asking, is this to do with there being like 2 moons and so the axis wobbles about? No, it's nothing to do with that. This is a magical reason. Something magical happened. We know that there was a lot of massive magic that happened way back in time. The clear answer to this, in my view, is that whatever brought the others, the White Walkers, into play was the thing which was so huge and so magical, was the thing that just put the entire planet and the seasons out of balance. So I think that's what it was. And I think it was there probably was a comet which happened, which sort of showed that. Let's go to a question from Brandy 1842. First of all, hello to you. I've been following you for quite some time. You got me into the Song of Ice and Fire books and helped me to get to sleep countless times. Excellent. I've been wondering if Braavos has a bigger role to play going forward. They seem much more powerful than their appearances until now would let us believe, and genuinely they are the only place in all of Planetos where there is actual progress. Emma Scheiman, also linked to this, says, hello, Robert. My question is in regards to Braavos, specifically their shipyard arsenal. The foreshadowing is there that Braavos will build a massive fleet that could turn the tide of whichever war they choose to take part in. Which conflict do you think Braavos will join, in support of whom, and what will be the outcome? Well, the short answer to this is yes. they are set up to be a huge actor. The question is, what are they going to do? Now, I'll explain a few of the pieces that are moving for them, first of all. And then we'll try and figure out what that might mean in terms of Bravo C politics. So the first part of this is the Iron Bank. Now, the Iron Bank is not just a bank that happens to be based in Bravos. The key holders, the shareholders effectively in the Iron Bank, are the important people in Bravos. They are the people who rule Bravos. So the Iron Bank effectively is an arm of the state. And they lend to absolutely everybody in the world, pretty much. And they have been lending to the Iron Throne. So we get this situation where the Seven Kingdoms has a huge debt to the Iron Bank. That is from the time that Robert Baratheon was in power. He didn't care about ruling. He just wanted to have a good time. He did tourneys with huge prizes. He would give out lavish gifts. He had very expensive tastes. The crown debt just increased and increased and increased. And the person who was in charge of this Master of Coin, obviously, was Littlefinger. And what did Littlefinger do? Well, he got loans from the Iron Bank, amongst other things. And so, when we get to the story we're in now, the Iron Throne owe the Iron Bank a lot of money. However, they've now gone into war. And war is expensive. And the Iron Bank, and you see them, they just drop in every now and then into this story. Well, our attention isn't really drawn to them, but they're there and they're important. And they come to King's Landing and say, okay, so you owe us a lot of money. And basically, Cersei's view is, well, we can't pay it back now. We need money. We need more money. It's not that we're not just that we can't pay this back. We need more money. We're in a war. We need to fund all of these armies. So she, or Kevin Lannister more specifically, sends back to Bravos after a few bits of negotiations. There is a negotiating team goes back that says, nope, we're not paying you what you've repeatedly asked us for. In fact, can you give us more money? Now, we see a hint of this in the Winds of Winter pre-release chapter from Arya, the Mercy chapter, where we see that they've arrived in Bravos. She sees them. In fact, she kills one of the guards of the delegation. Now, that's part one of the lending issue, because then we get Stannis. They clearly have started getting a bit frustrated now with the Iron Throne not paying back its debts. The Seven Kingdoms is not paying its debts, and they have got a very clear business model. What the Iron Bank do is that if a king, if a monarch, whoever cannot pay their debts, they will then go and fund their rival to launch a civil war, to take over, and then that rival will inherit the debt. That's their plan. And the rivals often accept because they get into power, and hey, yeah, they'll get into power in a bit of debt, but surely we'll figure that out at some point. So they've gone to Stannis. And Stannis, it takes them a little while to track Stannis down because he's up in the north. But eventually they track him down. And again, this is in the Theon pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter. And basically Stannis goes, well, yes, I am the rightful king. And okay, I kind of accept that means that I owe the Iron Bank some money because my brother borrowed a lot of money for them. And he literally signs in his own blood. He cuts his hand, signs in his own blood. And he says, okay, he sends a guy off to Bravos and says, get some more money, agree to, we will take this on as long as you give us more money to raise an army and then bring it back. So, Cersei owes money. Stannis owes money. John also, as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, sees an opportunity. He goes, so could we borrow to get a little bit more, some more provisions? Because we've got literally no money. We've got almost no soldiers here, and we've got a massive army of the undead coming towards us. Can we perhaps get some? And again, that's fine. So at the moment, they're actually funding, or have funded, 3 different major actors in Westeros, and there's no immediate chance for them to be getting their money back. So that's part 1 of the equation. Part 2 is the geopolitical situation going on in Essos, because they will not be unaware of the fact that Dany has been taking over city after city in Slavers Bay, disrupting the slave trade, which Braavos as a whole is hugely in favor of. Their anti-slavery stance is massive. The first law of Braavos is no one will ever be a slave. It's literally written in stone on the main bridge that they've got coming into Braavos. This is big for them. However, Dany probably in A Dance with Dragons is, when she comes back to Meereen, is going to start attacking city after city after city, and she will start looking like a threat to commerce. She might be getting rid of slavery, but she's a threat to commerce. So in all of this, what is Braavos going to do? Who are they going to support? They are a big city. They can produce a fighting ship a day. They can produce a massive navy very quickly. So what are they going to do? Well, when you start reading between the lines of the Arya chapters, she doesn't know what's going on. George R. Martin does this really well with Arya chapters. She doesn't understand all the politics, but it does seem to be hinting maybe there's going to be a shift in politics in Braavos quite soon. Maybe we're going to see this through Arya's eyes. She won't really know what's going on, but we may get a new Sea Lord. We may get an entire new foreign policy. Who are they going to support? Well, they're not going to support Cersei. That much is very clear. They will potentially support Stannis. Is Stannis going to survive? Potentially not. What about this new king, Fagon? He's coming over, claiming the throne. Maybe he even chucks Dany over, almost chucks Dany out. If so, they will definitely send a representative to him. He will probably cut some kind of deal with them, and then Dany arrives. This is a lot of background to say that Braavos's political decision about who to back is not easy. The short answer is that they will want to back the winner. But despite Dany's getting rid of slavery, they will be very, very nervous about her dragons, because they all know what the Valyrian Empire was like, the Valyrian Freehold. So how will they get involved? We will see that happen towards the second half of the Winds of Winter, but I could see that what they're trying to do is they're trying to pick a winner. They will hold back until they think they know who the winner is, and then they'll go with them. Martin S. Saying, a fantasy trope, threatening villain group in a leading role among evil, one step below the big bad or dark lord. Lord of the Rings, Nazgul. So a threatening villain group in a leading role among evil, one step below the big bad lord. Lord of the Rings, Nazgul, Wheel of Time, The Forsaken, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, The Red Hand. Do you see what I'm getting at? Yeah, it's often it's a trope, but like this idea of being having a it's like the Imperial Guard. This idea is that you have the elite who are there, who are absolutely loyal to the master, and then will head out and do whatever they need to do. Yes, it is a trope, but it's one which is very much based on human history. I would say you can look at Napoleon, you can look at the Roman Empire. This happens again and again and again. That whether it's just a big baddie or just an overlord will want to have a group of people who are fanatically supportive of them in close proximity. Reflective rambling. Picking up a question from Nicola Jurican. Hi there, both of you. Thank you, Reflective Rambling, picking up a question for someone else. I hugely appreciate that when someone does that. How did the Iron Bank of Bravos benefit from the doom of Valyria? Well, interesting question. I mean, while Valyria were in charge, there was always this threat from them for Bravos. So Bravos couldn't really go out into the open and just do whatever they wished to do. When the Valyrian freehold was destroyed with the doom of Valyria, they're a trading nation above and beyond absolutely everything else. They're a trading nation, and so they could then head out, and they wanted peace, and because peace would create trade. But it also created a huge amount of independent states. We get the 9 free cities. They were not free cities, really, before the Valyrian freehold fell. They had some freedoms, but Bravos apart, they all had some kind of agreement with the Valyrian freehold that meant that they weren't 100% independent. Given the independence, then given the doom of Valyria, Bravos could then kind of flex its muscles a bit. It no longer needed to be afraid of the Valyrians, and they could also follow their moral stance of getting rid of slavery. So, for example, they fought a lot of, I think it was 6 wars with Pentos, largely about slavery, which is Pentos doesn't technically have slavery. However, it has indentured servitude and things that are actually slavery, but you haven't got the name to it. So Bravos could actively go out and start imposing its moral vision on the world in a way that it could not, because Pentos was defended by the Valyrians until the doom of Valyria. Snowgal saying, and the brown shirts, yeah, quite. Let's go to, and Carl Carsnart talking about the Praetorian Guard. Let's go to Vinicius Harris saying, hello, Robert, long time fan. Good to see you. Something I have not seen discussed more is the role of Gendry in the Winds of Winter and beyond. How close to the show do you think we are getting with him? Will he eventually be the Lord of Storm's End? On a related note, or in fact, let me answer that one first, and then I'll get onto the other one. So, what's happening with Gendry? Now, this is one of those classic examples of the show being slightly different to the books. So, the show has one character, Gendry, who is a sort of an amalgamation of 2 characters in the books. There is Gendry and there is Edric Storm. Edric Storm is another bastard son of Robert Baratheon. He is based at Storm's End. He is the one who Melisandre does the leeches with, not Gendry himself, and she's the one that he's the one that she's wanting to kill, and then Davos saves. In the books, Davos saves him and basically sends him off to the free cities. I think he goes to Lys. He may well return, but that's who he is, and he is an acknowledged but not legitimized bastard, by which we mean that he's not in the line of succession, so he's not legitimized. However, Robert Baratheon has said, yep, that is my son. So he grew up in King's Landing in this kind of weird position where everybody knew he was a bastard, but he was the king's bastard. So you weren't going to mess with him. So he actually had a place at court. And he seems to have been not a bad person. There are people there who were Courtney Penrose, for example, seems to have been willing to die in order to defend him. So that's him. Gendry is the other bit of the story that we had for Gendry in the TV show. He was the smith in King's Landing. He gets rescued and put into the train with the Night's Watch heading north. he makes friends with Arya. He's there at Harrenhal, gets caught up with the Brotherhood without banners. However, he stays with the Brotherhood without banners. Arya leaves, he stays. He gets knighted, in fact, and he becomes their blacksmith. And that is where we leave him. Brienne encounters him during her wandering through the Riverlands, and she thinks, wow, you look just like Renly, and is about to quiz him on his parentage when they get attacked. So he, at this point in the book, seems blissfully unaware of the fact that he may well be the bastard son of King Robert Baratheon. So what's going to happen with him in the books? Well, will he end up as Lord of Storm's End? Perhaps Edric Storm might. That's entirely possible. Gendry himself, he could just be left by George R. R. Martin there in the Riverlands. It's entirely possible. He could actually go through all the... This would be one of those small mercies from George R. R. Martin towards his characters, but he could just go through and do what he likes doing, which is being a smith, and actually survive the story, and in the end, nobody tells him who he really is, and he just lives a happy life. That's entirely possible. Will he get involved with Arya again? Maybe. When she comes back, then she will very probably be faced with, and they didn't really play this up on the show, but I think that this was the sort of the hint that we got, which is probably from George R. R. Martin himself. When she comes back from Essos, she will be faced with a decision. Does she go south to kill the people on her kill list, or does she go north up to Winterfell? And George R. R. Martin likes those kind of decision points to happen at the inn at the crossroads or somewhere like that. And it's entirely possible that she will meet him again there. Chaos Ballerina, picking up a question for Samuel Vine. Thank you very much. With the prophecy of Azor Ahai coming from Ashai, with the very odd setting and condition of that city, is it possible that humanity used magic to sacrifice that city to empower Azor Ahai? Oh, interesting. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. So for those who don't know, with Ashai, this is, we only get reports of it. We've not had a character go there, so we haven't seen this firsthand. We get to read about it a bit in the world of Ice and Fire, but it's a dark place, a shy under the shadow, and the buildings seem to drink in light, and animals don't live there. Children don't live there. They can't grow any food. They don't, the water isn't good to drink, so people ship in all of their food to them. It's a massive city. You could, and I can't remember what they exactly said, but it was something like within it you could fit in Old Town and King's Landing and a few other cities all within its walls. However, only 10% of the buildings are occupied. Hardly anyone goes out. When you wander around, maybe there'll be like somebody going on in a litter with all the curtains down. It's a mysterious and dark place. So, is it like that because humanity used magic to sacrifice that city to empower Azor Ahai? So my favorite theory, I genuinely can't remember where I saw this from. If someone is in the chat and knows where this comes from, I saw this a long time ago. I will happily shout out whoever did originally come up with this one. But if you look at the shade of the evening trees in Karth, they are black, and the way that they're described is that they kind of drink in light. What we know, if you go over to Westeros and you get a weirwood tree, when you cut it down and when it dies, it it solidifies, it petrifies, it basically turns to stone. Now, weirwood trees and shade of the evening trees seem to be this kind of mirror opposite, both in colouring and also in what you can get the shade of the evening drink that we see Euron taking so much seems to be very similar to, but opposite, the weirwood paste that Bran is made to drink. It kind of opens up your third eye. The best idea I had that I've seen, as I say, genuinely can't remember where this was from, happy to shout it out, is that a Shai is built from these shade of the evening trees that have become petrified. And that is why we know that this is death and darkness. They surround the House of the Undying. This seems to be what they are connected with. And if you build houses from those chopped down trees, that would create a dark city that drank in light that you would not know is a wooden city, because everything has now turned to stone. Now, that comes from this idea then that you must say, okay, so there were forests and forests of these trees that got cut down. That's what happened in Westeros. We know that the first men chopped down lots of trees, lots of weirwood trees. Maybe something similar happened in the days of yore back over in Essos. So that's my general theory about what's going on over there. Just quickly flick through the chat. Andrew K saying, I think it's possible that Edric Storm is found and brought into the fold by Fagon's camp. Could be part of how they take Storm's End, considering how popular he is to that region. Yep, absolutely. That's a really good thought. Ranabir Mitra saying, this is Amanda's theory, disputed lands. Well, in that case, I'm very happy to give the shout out to Amanda. I knew I'd seen it somewhere, and I'm a big fan of Amanda. Disputed lands, I'm sure one of the moderators will put a link across to that in the chat. But yeah, that makes sense. She's excellent and very original thinker about A Song of Ice and Fire. Roma Steve saying, Valantis's plans. Could they try to steal one of the Slavers Bay dragons and send it to Aegon with Illyrio's funding? Okay, interesting. So Valantis they're one of the free cities. We see it. Tyrion passes through there. They are clearly very concerned about Dany because they have got huge amounts of slaves there, and Dany is getting rid of the slave trade. So they have constructed a fleet and they're going to send it over. Are they looking to steal a dragon? Well, they may well want a dragon, but I don't think they're the people who are going to be doing that. This is more to do with Euron trying to be stealing the dragon, in my view. Would they send it to Aegon? No. If they got one, they would keep it for themselves, I suspect. And Illyrio would not be wanting to fund Valantis. He would be trying to help them himself. I mean, I'm going to do a video on the whole Varys, Illyrio, Aegon plot, because I think it does confuse a lot of people, because it does shift around quite a lot, I'll be honest. Even the Golden Company comment on this plan is changing quite a bit. They're quite adaptable in what they're doing, but there is a very clear idea about what they're trying to do, and they're not trying to go through Valantis. They think that they can manage this themselves. Right, let's go to Snow Galaxy. You're just heading off. I did get your question. I will answer it later if you want to come look at the live stream again later on. Let's go to a question. Actually, we were talking about Gendry, the second half of that Vinicius was saying. On a related note, when Ned and Robert first meet in Winterfell, Robert proposes that the Baratheons' oldest son and the Starks' oldest daughter get married. If Sansa is to be the Lady of Winterfell, or even possibly Queen of the North, it would make sense for her to marry a bastard for political reasons. Possibly. I think Sansa's arc, my take, we will have to reassess this obviously when we get the next book, but at the moment it is taking her back up to Winterfell, yes, because she started out this, rose-tinted view of the world and everything's better down in King's Landing and knights and chivalry and yada, yada, yada. And slowly but surely that's been chipped away at. However, she has started learning. She's learned how to play the Game of Thrones. She's been observing Cersei and Littlefinger and Tyrion, all of these people who are committed to playing the game, and she's learning, and she will end up at King's Landing. Sansa's arc, though, as it stands, is she is still there, having some powerful man near her tell her who she has to marry. I think her arc has to end up with her being in control of who she marries, or indeed if she even marries. I think that there's a fair to middling chance, if she does end up as Lady of Winterfell, that she's there going, right, I'm not having anyone. This is now my safe place. I'm in charge up here, and I'm not having anyone in any kind of position of authority. That I am the only one who can be in the boss. So I actually like the idea that she doesn't marry, that she just doesn't want to. She can be this echo of Elizabeth I of England with the red hair, the Virgin Queen. That's the idea that we could get to with her, which is entirely possible. Let's go to Lady Pushkins saying, hi, Robert. I'm in sunny Corfu on holiday, eating and drinking too much, so might not pop into the stream tonight. Well, Corfu was lovely. I hope you enjoy it. My question is, who do you think will initiate the bringing back of Jon? Will it be Melisandre's idea? Will it just happen with the presence of magic and the burning of Shireen? In the show, it was Davos, but of course, he's not there. Okay, so big question. So let's go through the events that we have that are very likely, just to figure out how this might work. Because you're right, Davos has gone, Sam has gone. There are only one or two, depending on your perspective, POVs that we will see these events from. Because George R. R. Martin has said he's not bringing in any new big POVs. Melisandre is the main one. And then possibly Jon Snow if George R. R. Martin decides to do that for us. But what do we have? So Jon has been killed. From everyone's perspective, he's been killed by some Night's Watch loyalists. Now, I call them loyalists because that's what they are. Jon has turned around. He's got this letter, and he's turned around and said, that's it. I'm abandoning my post. I give up being Lord Commander. I'm giving up on my vow to not become involved in politics of what's going on down south. He is giving the whole thing up. And so the loyalists kill him. We see all this from Jon's perspective, so we don't think of them as loyalists. We're just thinking from his perspective, but it's the people who are taking the Night's Watch vow seriously who are killing him. Now, the situation in Castle Black is a lot more complex than it was on the TV show. On the TV show, there was basically a rebellion. There was just like one side against another side. And then Jon came back and it was like, I've returned. And it's like, oh no, so that means that you were in the right. It's not going to be like that. We get the Night's Watch split in at least two different parts. There's the people who were in favor of killing Jon. There's probably another few people who were in favor but weren't actively a part of it. There's a whole load of people who are Jon loyalists. Then you get a whole load of the wildlings who are there. Then you get the Melisandre and the Queen's men who are there. Lots of different groups. First question is, what are they going to do with his body? He's just been killed. Regardless of what you do with the people who killed him, everybody knows that the others are coming, and you need to make sure that this body does not become a white. Now, in Jon's last chapter, we did get, I think, some big clues that they will just freeze his body. They will put it in the ice cells. Jon went to inspect it because they'd had a few Night's Watchmen die, and they put the bodies in the ice cells, and then he went, let's just double check that that actually works. They haven't been animated. Sure enough, it seems to work. So the obvious thing, the foreshadowed and obvious thing, is that his body will get left in the ice shells and will freeze. So it's going to stay in roughly the same condition as it was before, but obviously frozen. Now, then, regardless of what happens with the people who killed him, they may run off. They may. I talked years ago to Bookshelf Stud, a great theorist on this, who theorized that they would head off to the Night Fort. Maybe Jon, who had walked into Ghost, might go and hunt them down. Fantastic dark idea. Love it to bits. Regardless of what happens there, we're going to get a new character arriving up at the wall soon, who is fake Arya, Jane Poole. We saw her escape from Winterfell, and with Theon, we saw them both get captured by Stannis, and Theon is telling her, you have to keep on telling people you're Arya. This is how you stay alive. If people just think you're just like a Jane Poole or nobody, then they might kill you. If you keep telling people that you're Arya, then you'll stay alive. So she is now heading up. Stannis sends her up, sort of like a gift to Jon Snow, actually. He sends her up to the wall. And what's she going to do when she gets there? Well, probably they will ask her what should happen with Jon's body, because she's independent and everybody knows she's a Stark, and maybe she gets the opportunity to decide. But alongside all of that, Melisandre will get news with that delegation who come up from Stannis that things are not actually that great. Stannis, he puts a brave face on it, but when you read between the lines, his troops are dying. The horses he's got are dying and being eaten. He's gonna freeze to death actually quite soon. This is going to concern her. She will probably see a battle in her flames, which is the battle of ice, which is coming up. But that, even if it's decisive, as it probably will be for Stannis, that will not get them access to Winterfell. And so they're going to be camped outside Winterfell in the freezing cold. This is almost certainly what is going to prompt her to want to produce some kind of magic to help with the weather. And she wants to use King's Blood. Sadly, she's already got Mance Rayder has been sent away. She will discover that Mance Rayder's baby has also gone away with the baby swap idea that Jon did, sending down with Sam and Gilly. Who has she got left? It's just Shireen. So that is almost certainly the build-up to what happens with Shireen. We shouldn't take that as 100% anymore, I suspect, because George R. R. Martin has emphasized how much he's shifting away from the TV show, but it's the most likely outcome. Now, if you have somebody who is going to be burned, massive fire, you might as well burn a few other bodies in it while you're at it. So they'll take the bodies out from the ice cells, including Jon's, and put them onto the funeral pyre, the pyre to kill Shireen. Now, what happens then? Well, Jon's body thaws, but then he gets pushed back into it. This is so dark. He gets pushed back into it, who by my guess is Bloodraven, and sort of stumbles out from it. So he emerges from the flames this is the starting point for Melisandre to be thinking perhaps Jon Snow is Azor Ahai emerging from the flames like that. So it's not going to be Davos. I don't think it's going to be Melisandre specifically sort of leaning over him and saying, "Come back, Jon Snow." Maybe she will give his frozen body the last kiss in the way that Thoros of Myr did to Beric Dondarrion, and maybe she will decide that that is why he came back. But I don't think it's going to be a matter of a person bringing him back. I think it's going to be a matter of him getting pushed back into his body. Let's Karlsnark saying, yeah, we're building a pyre, bring out your dead. That's basically the feeling I'm going for. Let's go to a question from Vance. I have an observation and a question about the societal impact of Aegon the Conqueror's prophecy. Prior to the conquest, Westeros was a highly militarized society due to constant warfare between the numerous lords and kings. This should have changed after the conquest, as warfare between lords was prohibited with the establishment of the king's peace enacted by Aegon. In our own world, we saw in Japan, after the unification by the Tokugawa shogunate, apologies, poor pronunciation, I'm sure, Tokugawa shogunate, the samurai class changed the focus from war to artistic endeavors and the rise of the merchant class, but this did not happen in Westeros. Do you think this adherence to a martial society and code is in keeping with preparations made for Aegon's prophecy? I think it's in keeping with it. I don't think this is intentional on behalf of the monarchy, because the situation is that we'd never really had, and we talk in our own world history of like Pax Romana, Pax Britannica, when you have like a peace enforced by being a ruler over who's sort of in charge, making sure that war does not break out between different parts. That's not quite how this works. The way that Aegon set up the situation is that the Targaryens didn't have an army, or at least they only had a small army. You get the Crown Lands, which is that area around King's Landing, up through sort of Duskendale, Rosby, up into Massey's Hook, that kind of area, plus Dragonstone, etc. That was their land, but that was not enough to make a massive army. Whenever they needed a proper army, they just went out to all of their regions and said, okay, send us your troops and you can be in charge of your bit of them and things like that. That's the way it worked. Now, obviously, a lord could think, well, I'm not going to come under attack. I can start to reduce my own forces. But that doesn't seem to happen huge amounts because war doesn't stop. Pax Targaryen, or whatever we wish to call it, it happened in patches, but if you look at the 300 odd years of Targaryen rule, there's not that much of no war. Aegon himself was fighting lots of battles with the Dornish. He wasn't just fighting with Targaryens. He would use soldiers from the Reach. He would use soldiers from the Stormlands. Then you got civil war with Maegor and Aenys. There was a reasonable amount of peace under people like Jaehaerys and then Viserys, but then you had the Dance of the Dragons, which, as we will see when we get there in House of the Dragon, is not just about one Targaryen against another Targaryen. We'll have huge armies from all of the major houses meeting each other in battle. You get to the Blackfire rebellions, again, every few years, the noble houses having to fight, putting their soldiers forward. So this idea of Pax Targaryen never really took hold. which is why people never really shifted from this more martial approach to how society should work. Was that intentional in order to meet the needs of Aegon's prophecy, as in there should always be lots of soldiers around just in case the others invade? I mean, it could be, but I don't think we've seen any evidence of that. Martin S. This is Lord of the Rings question. I'll do this one quickly. I'll try and do the Lord of the Rings ones after I've done all the Song of Ice and Fire ones, but I'll do this one quickly. If Smaug swallowed Bilbo along with the ring in the Third Age, 2941, and Sauron subsequently learned that the ring was located inside Smaug's stomach, how do you think Sauron would act and what would happen? I mean, thankfully, that's one of those questions that we don't ever need to worry about. But if Sauron knew where the One Ring was, he would throw absolutely everything at getting hold of it again. It's the only short answer. And Smaug was very powerful, but it only took one arrow to take him down. So if the question is, would Sauron be, oh, well, it's okay, Smaug's got it, he's all right, that's not his thing. Sauron desperately wanted the One Ring, and he would do anything he needed to do to get it. And if he knew where it was, he would throw everything towards it. Red Team Review in the chat. Oh, hi there. Great to see you. Red Team Review, for anyone who does not know, fantastic other channel covering A Song of Ice and Fire, as well as many other things. Did you see the Targaryen wall art that was displayed in Viserys' bedroom in House of the Dragon? It was a foursome between Aegon, his sister wives, and a dragon. When can we expect to see that as your background? This is a family-friendly show, so it will not be appearing as my background. But yes, you can definitely find that if you go and have a look for it. Maybe I'll tweet it out so people can have a look. This was there. You remember the conversation that Viserys and Daemon had when it was like, would you like to go, and Alison was there, would you like to go and look at the frescoes? And it was like, Daemon doesn't like to see the frescoes. But when you look at them, they're actually really very erotic. So I think the key thing here is that the dragon must have three heads is a theme which is echoed quite a few times. I did a video recently about the song that Daemon sang to Vermithor. When you read the lyrics, this adds an extra layer into our understanding of dragon bonding. So that is, I think, just erotic art, but I think that it hints at something more. But great to see you, Red Team Review. Eric Harker saying House Peak has a history of choosing the wrong side. So with that being said, it doesn't look good for Fagon. I think there's a lot of hints that Fagon's not long for this world. House Peak, if you read Fire and Blood, you see again and again that House Peak does pick the wrong team. And we get Gorman Peak, we get Sir Unwin Peak there, who, to be fair to him, it was the Regency. He saw his chance, he shot his shot, he just failed. House Peak could have become the most powerful and influential house in the land. He just failed. And then they just kept on supporting the wrong side in this rebellion, and the Blackfire Rebellion, and then the Peak Uprising, and this was not good. And each time they lose, they just lose another castle. They go down in the rankings a little bit more. Having them on your side is the opposite to a lucky charm. Now, will Fagon fail? I think Fagon will succeed in the short term, fail in the long term. That's my general view. There's everything to suggest that he is going to be able to sweep Cersei out of King's Landing in the Winds of Winter. However, when you start looking at things like the prophecies in the House of the Undying, that's when you see that he clearly is the Mummer's dragon. He clearly is this cloth dragon which is being paraded around and people are cheering. He's going to be successful, but Danny will see through the lies, will reveal the lies. The lie being he's a Blackfire in this case, I suspect. So he's going to get rid of Danny, but then, he's going to get rid of Cersei, but then I suspect Danny will come in and get rid of him. So, yeah, House Peak or no House Peak, I think that ultimately is bound to be a failure. Luna Cascade, Patreon question. Hello, Robert. The Baratheon words are, ours is the fury, notorious temperament. What Baratheon traits does Rhaenys have? Right, I mean, I suppose it depends which Rhaenys you're talking about here. But yes, so this is connected in with the storm. If you're talking, I'm just trying to think which Rhaenys you might be. I don't know. I'll just answer more generally then. Apologies. But ours is the fury is very much the House Baratheon. They pick up from House Dondarrion, and Dondarrion beat the Storm God by building Storm's End against the fury of the Storm God, and that is the feel we get. House Baratheon, who take over from them, seem to inherit or seem to have the same kind of temperament as House Durrandon, not Dondarrion, I think. So that's where they're at. And so you get Robert Baratheon is the purest expression we get of this. Big, strong, always in the thick of the battle. And ours is the fury is just, it's almost a threat. One slight tangent I'll take off of this is that most of the house words like this try and tell us something about the character of the house. It's not unique, but the interesting thing about House Stark is that winter is coming is actually not about the house. It's not about how, ours is the fury or growing strong or anything along those lines. The Lannisters always pay their debt. No, it's nothing about the house itself. It's about the wider world, which shows that the House Stark has got this bigger perspective than everyone else. Ranabir Mitra saying, I had a super thanks about Damon's song, want to discuss. Oh, you did do that, and I said I would pick that one up in the chat. I forgot to copy that one across. Sorry, I literally got back from my travels just a few hours ago. I forgot about that one completely. Apologies, Ranabir. I will try and remember to pick that one up for my next live stream. So, yeah, apology. I will do that. Let's go to a question from Mage Pie. I am very hyped for the resolution of the Old Town knot. So many fun characters converging at a single location. People with magical powers and secret identities. Ironborn maesters, freaking krakens, a sand snake and a faceless man. Who would win in a possible confrontation, Euron or Jaqen? Can Euron Crow's Eye maybe see through glamour? We know he had dealings with the Faceless Men before, but what do they think about his quest for godhood? Wouldn't it make Euron their natural enemy? Could his plan require a literal priest of death as a final sacrifice on the altar of immortality? So lots of questions going on there. In terms of the Faceless Men, yes, they're clearly aware of Euron. There's every hint that they've worked with him before. They will be aware of him. Euron currently seems to be collecting priests in order to use them for he's strapping them to the front of his boats for the upcoming battle. This seems to be, as well as his lover, who is carrying his unborn child, which, as he is the rightful, it has to be said, king of the Iron Islands, that is King's blood. So he is trying to create this almost apocalyptic magic. He's almost just like throwing everything at it, sacrifices left, right, and center, just to see what happens. And he is trying to destroy all the gods. He's going to destroy all the land. And that is, he wishes to become a god himself. But his idea of what that means, as much as anything else, is if people treat him like a god, that is, he already says, I am a god. So that's kind of where he's going. Does that make him the opposite of the Faceless Men, or their natural enemy? Not as much, I would argue, as somebody who attempts to deny death. They are the priests of the god of death. Their concept, their idea, their entire shtick is that Valamogulis, all men must die, everyone must die, and if you are preventing death, then you are in opposition to their god. Euron's not preventing death. Euron's killing loads of things, left, right, and center. So he's not like being an agent for their god, but I don't think they would see him as a natural enemy. The fact that he is a god, or he claims to be a god, and that god brings death, is not that, and here we get into the theology of the Faceless Men, if you go into their temple, the House of Black and White, you see these gods around it. And Arya doesn't know all of them, but she recognizes some of them. One of them is the Stranger from the Seven. And there are others which are these dark gods. And basically their view is that everybody recognizes the god of death. They just don't give it that name. There is a god of death in all of these religions, or an aspect of the god of death in all of these religions. They just don't necessarily give it that name. Euron would just become a part of their pantheon of people who show an aspect of the god of death. So I don't actually think that that's who they're against. I think they are against the others who are defying death, bringing people back to life. I think they would be against Qyburn, bringing people like the Zombie Mountain back to life. I think that they would be against the House of the Undying. I think that this is what they're ultimately against, not people like Euron. Andrew K saying, curious, and this is related to this, curious how reliable a narrator Aaron's POV of Euron's attack will be if, from Aaron's perspective, considering how inebriated he will be. Hopefully some clarity from Sam. So yeah, we've got two POVs here. We're working on the assumption, which I think is a fair assumption, that at some point, well, two things. First of all, there's going to be a massive sea battle, which Euron is basically inviting. He's not trying to hide from it. He's just wants the timing to be right. That's the first thing. And Aaron is going to be witness to that, strapped onto a boat. If he survives that, then we're working on the assumption that Euron is going to attack Old Town. I think it's a fair assumption. So we may well see some of it from his perspective. Now, it's possible. What George R. Martin often does when we get this kind of thing is he gives a retrospective POV. So we see Aaron, for example, perhaps he's in a jail cell, perhaps he's in the galley of a boat, and then he's thinking back to what had just happened. And trying to work through what just happened. Now, we will definitely see some of this from Sam's perspective. My feeling is that the attack on Old Town can't be too soon, because we think there's a lot of things that Sam has to do or achieve in Old Town first. He has to learn some stuff before he escapes back up north. But yeah, we will see. What we will probably, the breakdown we'll probably get is that Sam is going to be inside the city, escaping and just getting the vibe of what it's like as a city under attack. And then Aaron will be there with the vibe of the attackers. If you remember back to the Battle of the Blackwater, what you will find is in the book that was told from 3 different perspectives. Over about 6 chapters ago, I remember, you had Sansa's perspective. She was sat there with the women hidden in Maegor's holdfast. She was just getting reports coming in of what's going on. Then you had Tyrion's perspective. He was kind of masterminding the defense. Then you get Davos's, he was there, part of the attacking fleet. And so with those 3 POVs, we could piece together what was going on. And I think that's probably the way, in a slightly smaller way, George R. Martin would be using this. He'll use very similar approaches to what we sometimes are going to call the Battle of Fire, what George R. Martin has called the Battle of Fire, the Battle of Marine, which is going to happen towards the beginning of the Winds of Winter. We already know we've got 2 perspectives going on. We've got Tyrion, who is camped sort of outside the battle and trying to persuade his team to be switching sides, to be on Dany's side. We know we've got Barristan's POV. This is one of the POVs George R. Martin has kind of like pre-released POV that he's read out. At some point, we're going to have his perspective leading the defensive marine. We're also going to have Victarion's perspective as he attacks. So that's going to be seen from 3 different POVs, and we're going to get the same kind of idea down in Old Town, I suspect. Question from Victoria Gill, saying, thoughts. The White Walker's weakness is the weirwood network. Trees equals circulatory system. Oxygen, saline, iron. Shade of the Evening is oxygen or oxy-iron deficient. Blood/blue. White Walkers can't cross sea. Iron kills them and fire eats oxygen. I mean, I think that's a very well thought out idea. I suspect George R. Martin has taken inspiration from this. He certainly does. We don't, again, it's not really in the show so much, but in the book you get the descriptions of the others and dead people brought back, people like Beric with black blood. And so this is something which is sort of unnaturally kept alive, which is very much the kind of feeling of the Shade of the Evening trees. However, George R. Martin with this kind of thing, he very much talks about this is magical. This isn't scientific. So we shouldn't be, whereas that may well make perfect sense scientifically, that won't be the thought process that George R. Martin himself went through. He just kind of like does a thing which kind of echoes in what seems to work for us, which I hope makes sense. Let's go to Saint Jemalamington. There we go. Hi, Robert. Great to see you. Thanks for the amazing content. You're very welcome. Are there any changes to certain characters or storylines you're expecting to see in House of the Dragon? I hope to see Kristen Cole's death being more significant. That's your first super chat, so thank you very much. Any changes I'm expecting in House of the Dragon? I think, well, there's quite a few here. I was just trying to work out which ones I'm going to sort of highlight. One of the things which I think is going to be quite clear is this spy. I did a video on this ages ago. The spy war, which is going to be happening in House of the Dragon, because we didn't really get this impression from Fire and Blood. we always had Lady Miseria seems to have been sort of, to start with, on Damon's side. Here it's very clear she's an independent operator, and she will now feel betrayed by and under attack from Team Green. Why? Because she struck a deal with Team Green to give them baby Aegon, who was out there, and he does act like a baby sometimes, but Aegon, who was out there in King's Landing when they were trying to find their candidate to be king. She had him and she'd hidden him, and she told Otto Hightower where to find him, in return for not just a sack of gold, but also a commitment to end the child fighting pits. I imagine that that's not going to happen now because they've got other things that they're worrying about. But also, it was a much overlooked small point, overlooked for understandable-ish reasons. If you remember the scene with the feet, with Alicent's feet and Larys, you may not have actually been paying attention to the dialogue at that point. Perhaps you were, but I found quite a lot of people weren't. The dialogue at that point was him basically saying that he's discovered that there's this spy network out there run by Miseria, and would she like him to get rid of it? And she basically says yes. And so next we see a mysterious hooded person walking away from Miseria's manse, which is now in flames. She is now going to feel under attack from them. So that is one thing which is going to feel very different, is she is going to be an independent operator, and she is going to be forced, or feel like she has to try and force to side with Team Black just in order to survive. So that's one thing I'm expecting to be slightly different. What else? I think the other thing, Kristen Cole's death being more significant, yes, I think they've built him up as a character, so we will see more from that. What I am wondering is that the two lore things that maybe this is me hoping that we get more, the two key lore things that they've been introducing on this show. The first one is this Aegon's prophecy thing. Where is it going? Rhaenyra has it. Then we get Daemon. She basically tells Daemon because she assumed that he must know it, but he hadn't been told it. Has she told her heir? I have a feeling that we're going to get more happening up in Winterfell, it's passed over in just a few pages in the book, but I think that they won't be able to resist, given this is the only time really they go up to Winterfell here. Having introduced this topic of the threat from the north with this prophecy, I think we will see an expansion of what happened there when Jace went up to visit. And then connected to that, the other thing that I'm hoping we see is a bit more of an explanation of this "we don't have control of the dragons" thing, which we saw when Vhagar, when Aemond lost control of Vhagar, and he almost certainly will just try and style it out and say, "Oh, I meant to do that," but we can see that that's not what happened. I'm hoping that they give us a bit more on that they actually try and show where and why and how this lack of control comes. Is this going to play another important role moving forward in the story? It's quite possible. Martin S. In many fantasy series, they have dwarves as a fantasy race, but in Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire, they have dwarves in the general real-world sense, a human with dwarfism. How do you think George R. Martin came up with that? I think just in real life, it's he seems to have, to a degree, when he was first conceptualizing the character, I think it's less so now, but he seems to have based Tyrion on Richard III of England, who was portrayed in Shakespeare and in other places as being a hunchback, very manipulative, short, ugly, and I think George R. R. Martin wanted to play on that. I think he wanted this idea of what could you have as somebody who is seen by everyone around them as just being lower than low because of what they look like physically. But what happens when you put that person into one of the most powerful positions in the land? So that, I think, is where he went with that Tyrion character. And then the moment you have Tyrion, who is the main, not the main, but the biggest vehicle we have, he gets so many POV chapters, does Tyrion. In order for us to understand this character, we do need to see other characters who he can empathize with or not, who also have dwarfism. So that's that's where I think he went with that. Let's go with Rhaenys from Patreon saying, I have a theory that, at least in show canon, the cat's paw dagger in House of the Dragon belonged to Rhaenys. Actually, that probably wasn't Rhaenys. I probably just copied across Rhaenys there. Apology, I can't remember who it was this question came from. This sometimes happens when I cut and paste all the things into one document so I can use them. Anyway, the theory is that this gives all three of the original conquerors their own Valyrian blade, and it can easily be concealed, which I think fits with Rhaenys' characterization, as she is a proper lady who is still a warrior. No real question, but I'd like to know what you think. Incidentally, this may also then be something that was returned to Aegon in the letter from Dawn, thus giving him back the physical reminder of his prophecy, which would allow it to endure. Yeah, I've had these thoughts myself. This idea, two of the Targaryens clearly had Valyrian steel swords. What about the third Targaryen? Did she get anything? Certainly nothing that is worth being noted by the biographers. The Maesters didn't. But a dagger would kind of fit. So, yeah, I like the idea. I don't think we've got the evidence for it one way or the other. I think it does add something to what you suggest. When we get that letter that Aegon gets, and he flies off to Dragonstone, it's for something. My assumption is that this is the return of her body, and if that is returned with that dagger, which is his prophecy, that just adds another layer to it. Yeah. So I like it. I don't think we've got the evidence to say one way or the other, but it seems to make sense. Ranabe and Mitra saying, my first chat about Lord of the Rings. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but was Tom Bombadil another incarnation of Eru, similar to how the Valar were created? Modlove and Glory Man United. Well, GGMU to you, but this does perfectly give me the opportunity to say, moderators, thank you. You are amazing. If you are in the chat, if you're having an enjoyable time there, this is being kept safe and happy for you by a wonderful team of moderators. Could you just show them a little bit of love? Thank you very much. And while I'm doing a few thank yous, also thank you to my patrons. This is why I answer my patrons' questions on these live streams, because I can't do what I do without your support. So thank you. I hugely appreciate it. But the when I've been Mitra, yeah, I'll try and give most of my Lord of the Rings stuff in the second half of this live stream. I will quickly answer this one here. Now, Tom Bombadil is an anachronism. J.R.R. Tolkien admitted that he was basically, he didn't quite use these words, but he basically said that he wasn't plot important, but he was world important. Now, what is he? I have done a video on this if you want my full thoughts on this, but basically he is in some way an expression of Arda, the planet. He is there. He is not involved in, he doesn't care about the wider politics. He is just about being and living and enjoying the world that is there. If you want to get into deeper Tolkien lore, given his strong association with singing, I think that you could put a strong argument the fact that he is an echo of the Song of the Valar that created or the music of the Ainur that created all of Arda and all of the world. So, and I think he is that bit which is reflective of Middle Earth. Let's go to a question from Charis Ballerina. Do all whites continue to decompose after resurrection, or is it just ice whites? Was Cold Hands just not raised before he gained his cold hands? Does this mean his state isn't a good indicator of his age? Well, it's an interesting question. We don't know the details of this, but Cold Hands, he's still wearing his Night's Watch clothes, which clearly gives the impression that he is a member of the Night's Watch. He is in a cold part of it. Let's not forget, north of the wall is always cold, so that will preserve. What we don't know is exactly what's going on with other types of whites. So science whites, so like Zombie Mountain, the clear implication is that Qyburn must have somehow figured out a way to stop the decomposition. People don't immediately think, oh, that stink is horrible. And also he doesn't seem to be collapsing because suddenly all of the muscles are atrophying, and then that he seems to be working. So there is a magic or something which is keeping him going. If you want, I did a video with History of Westeros about, I think it was about Cold Hands, from a while ago, where we did go through trying to work out when he is from, so how old he is. I won't go through all the detail. I can't remember, frankly, all of the details of the logic that we went through, but we did come up, I think, with a reasonably clear idea of how old he might be. So if you're interested in that, do go and check out that video. Let's go to Howland's little sister saying, hello, Robert, from a hot and dry Texas. And hello from a cold and wet England. What are your thoughts about House Dane? I just can't imagine that it's as simple and straightforward as, hey, folks, we've got the sword that will solve all our problems, so who wants to use it? There has to be more to the backstory. It's such an ancient house and their heritage is unique. What would you write if this is your story? Okay, so I think some things are reasonably clear. So they're an incredibly old family. They seem to be connected with the Long Night. Now, I think it's one of the most obvious links in terms of sword names that we can possibly have. Their sword is called Dawn. And the sword that was used to, and we don't know the details, we're not actually shown how it was used, but it was used to end the first long night, was Lightbringer. Lightbringer, what does Dawn do? It brings light. So the echo, the link here, it could be a translation issue, but it's the same kind of thing. I think it's the most obvious suggestion that Dawn is Lightbringer. How does that fit into the backstory of this family? Well, if you have defeated the others, but you think that they might come back at some point, you go through a plan to try and make sure that future generations, could be hundreds, could be thousands of years in the future, have what they need in order to defend against another attack from the others. You create a magical wall. The wall is not about how high, physically high it is. It has magic in it that prevents things passing through. So you create a magical wall. You create an order of people who swear an oath that are there guarding this wall. And you set up a principle where they get given every year dragonglass, which is the thing which appears to be most effective against the others. But then you also have, and again, we do not know the details of how it was used, but let's say you have this one big magical sword, which is not just a Valyrian steel sword, it's more ancient than that. It has some connection perhaps with a comet. because this is the story we're told of House Dane, who they followed a comet which landed on this island on the south coast, and they forged a sword from the metal from that comet, and that's where they built their home. But if the other's coming from the north, why don't you put this magical sword all the way to the south of the continent? Let's have a family who are there to guard it forever. And this becomes the most important item for that family. And let's say that it's not just that this is their sword that anyone can use, because there's a different tradition in House Dane to all of the other families with their Valyrian steel swords. Almost every family with their Valyrian steel swords, it gets passed on to the next person. The next leader of the house gets, so ice was always held by the Lord of Winterfell, and then it gets passed down to the next Lord of Winterfell and the next Lord of Winterfell. And the same goes for all of these other. Blackfire was passed down from Targaryen king to Targaryen king. Yes, a couple of small exceptions, but that's what the idea was. That's not what happens with Dawn. Dawn is only ever used by someone who is deemed worthy. And this isn't just about someone who is a good fighter. They have to be of noble character in some way as well. We don't know all of the details of this. But if you were to keep a sword for many, many generations, that is probably where you do it. On the south coast, far away from where the baddies are, that they could perhaps capture it straight away, kept on an island which very probably protects it from an attack from the others. They don't seem to want to cross open water, may not be able to cross open water, and then you create this mythos around it that can be passed down from generation to generation, how this can only be touched not just by any member of the family, but it can only be used by somebody of upright moral position, as well as being a good fighter. So that, I think, seems to be the plan. There's a lot of legend about that time. George R. Martin says to us of these legends as literally true, because they are legends. So we have to just, is the heart of this, what actually emerged from this, and try and figure out what that might mean. Did they arrive from far in the east following a comet? It's possible, but we shouldn't necessarily take that as being the truth of it. Let's go to a question from Jack saying, hi, Robert. It's a pleasure to join your Patreon community and support you and the channel on a more permanent basis. Well, welcome. Fantastic. Welcome to the community. Your live streams have helped me a lot from getting to sleep to getting through life. Well, I appreciate that. I do know a lot of people listen to these to get to sleep, and I've decided to take that as a compliment. You introduced me to the H plus A equals J and M. This is Howland and Ashara got married and had Jojen and Mira as children theory. I'm wondering, do you still subscribe to the theory? And if so, what's the evidence that supports this, and how will it be revealed? Related to this, Snowgal says, hello, Robert. I am convinced by your argument that Ashara Dane is married to Howland Reed. My question is, do the Danes also know this? Do they know that she is not dead, but is living in the neck? Okay, so yes, I do still subscribe to this. This isn't, I should probably clarify, this isn't my original idea. This is an idea that's been knocking around in the Song of Ice and Fire community for a while. And there's lots of evidence. I won't go through all of it right now. But for me, from a literary perspective, one of the strongest bits of evidence that I think we have here is the story that Jojen and Mira tell to Bran. Now, we use this quite a lot to understand things that happened at Harrenhal, the Night of the Laughing Tree, things like that. But if you take a step back, Jojen and Mira say, our dad told us this story a lot. So they're almost like repeating this family story, which has been passed down to them. And the way that the story is framed, George R. Martin, this will be done deliberately by George R. Martin. The way that the story is framed is from the perspective of the lad. The lad is Howland Reed. We're seeing this story through Howland Reed's eyes. Now, we see he goes to the Other Faces, he goes up to Harrenhal, and all of the people that he meets get nicknames to do with their house and their temperament. So, for example, we have the young wolf, the shy wolf, the young wolf being Benjamin, the shy wolf was Ned. We get the Dragon Prince. Everybody gets a name associated with what their house is. Until we get to one character who is the Maiden. Now, this character is Ashara Dane. And we get in this story, which is telling us about what happens with the important geopolitical things that happen at Harrenhal. And the lad then sees the Maiden. And he takes note in this, one of the most important times that we have in the entire history of Westeros. He's there, and the story immediately goes into detail of what she looked like, what her hair was like, what color eyes she had, who did she dance with that night, and that structure of the story feels like a love story. This is how the lad and the maiden, the only two characters who aren't there listed by, their house or their position or something like that, how they met. And if it makes sense, therefore, that this is a story that Howland Reed would have told his children. This is a How I Met Your Mother story. That's how it comes across when you read it, a How I Met Your Mother story. Because if it is not How I Met Your Mother, this is Howland Reed telling his kids this story about how, just around the time I met your actual mother, I met this super hot girl whose hair was flowing and her eyes were like this. And then I sat and I stared at her dancing all night. The first person she danced with was this person. The second person she danced with was that person. The third person. And it's like, if this isn't How I Met Your Mother, this is Howland Reed obsessing over some person that he met at about the same time as he met their mother. So that's the first thing that makes you go, that kind of makes sense. But is there any other evidence that kind of backs this up? Well, obviously there were the rumors about Ned and Ashara. But then we get, I think it's Harwin who's talking to Arya, who addresses these head on. And he says, so what if, there was, stuff that happened in his tent, in Ned's tent with Ashara. And it's like, the clear implication, this was the rumor. This was the rumor that Ashara Dane was seen going into Ned Stark's tent. And then, hey, maybe people heard a few things. That seems quite strong against Ned Stark until you read in the story that actually it wasn't just Ned in his tent, because he got Howland to share his tent with him. Okay, so that again kind of matches up. Then sort of skipping forward a whole load of there are various bits of evidence. Then you get the curious case of why the Danes love Ned Stark. Because they do. They think he's great. They named their oldest son after him. Their oldest son has heard these stories about how amazing Ned Stark is, and desperately wishes that he could meet him. This guy is a hero to them. How on earth could Ned Stark be a hero to House Dane? Yeah, he brought their sword back. Good. This is an important sword for them. But that doesn't seem to quite tell the whole story here, particularly when you get the clear idea that we know Ned and Arthur Dane fought. And then the official rumor is that Ashara Dane committed suicide because Ned abandoned her. That clearly didn't happen. Clearly did not happen. They would not hero worship him if their daughter committed suicide because of the way that he treated her. So that clearly did not happen. So she did not commit suicide because of something he did. In the context we have there, though, we have to remember that everyone in Rhaegar's inner circle had to be seen to be dead or gone or out of there. Robert Baratheon was actively hunting down and killing anyone who had anything to do with this. Anyone who was a Targaryen, he went and actively killed. Rhaegar died. He personally killed Rhaegar. Rhaegar's buddies, Arthur Dane, died. Oswald Went died. He had two. Rhaegar had two knights who were his squires, Miles Mouton and Richard Longmouth. Both of those, one Miles Mouton died, Richard Longmouth disappeared, believed dead. Then you get even more characters. I'm running out of inspiration on characters' names, but the inner circle around Rhaegar, they all died or had to go. John Connington is another example. John Connington had to leave in exile and was presumed dead. So all of them had to. The only person who was left, Elia, got killed. Her children got killed. The only person that was left was Ashara Dane. Now, Ashara Dane would have been killed. Almost certainly. She was the closest maid to Elia. We know that she was there with her and went up to Harrenhal. She was part of this inner circle. The Danes were part of the inner circle. So all the evidence seems to suggest this was a faked death. Ned helped fake this. If he then, if what we think happened earlier, that Ashara and Howland fell in love, then Ned could have said, okay, I will help carry the two of you up to the neck. She can survive. I am the liege lord. I give you two permission to marry as long as you never leave the neck and never say what happened in the Tower of Joy. That would fit all of the different things that we need to happen. There's also a whole load of stuff that Barristan says as well, if you want to really get into this. He gets quite obsessed with Daenerys. Daenerys reminds him a little bit. Her eyes remind him of Ashara Dane. He had the hots for Ashara Dane, and he keeps on talking about things like, mud is not good. She wouldn't settle for a mud person, and mud men is something that is a derogatory term for House Reed and the Crannog men. He also talks in a rather weird, or thinks in a weird way, about if only, if I had been more involved and won the tourney, would Ashara Dane have turned to me instead of Stark? Presumably for help. So he knows that Ashara Dane turned to presumably Ned Stark for help. Why? Presumably because she was pregnant, and we know that Howland Reed, not Howland, we know that what's his name? Barristan. He was of the generation and of the religion that really frowned on that kind of thing. So all of the evidence kind of adds up. The last thing to add into this is just a really small detail. When Meera and Jojen go up to Winterfell and they pledge the allegiance of House Reed to the new king, Robb, it's to Bran. They get introduced as Lady Meera and her brother Jojen, which sounds like a so what? But this was an official court, an official introduction. Her name went first, which implies that she is the heir, not Jojen. Why is that important? Because where's the only part of the Seven Kingdoms where the oldest inherits regardless of gender. If the woman if the daughter is older than the son, the daughter inherits. Where's the only place that is in Dawn? Ashara Dane, House Dane is in Dawn. So there's lots of little bits of evidence here. There's not one knockout bit, but it fits everything. It fits all the things that have to work for this. It fits why on earth Mira Reed was announced first. It fits what Barristan was thinking. It fits why House Dane loved Ned Stark. It fits why there was that really weird story that Howland Reed told to his kids, that if it's not about their mother, then why on earth was he telling the story? There's so much about this. Orana Demetrius is saying in the chat, I don't know about Arthur Dane being dead. I think he's also there in the neck. That's a possibility, but yeah, I'm digressing a little bit already. Let's go to a question from Commander Ray, saying, I watched a video some time ago that discussed the nature of Rhaegar and Lyanna's relationship, and they criticized the way the show handled it, claiming it wasn't love, but that it was far more predatory on the older prince's part, and what may to Lyanna have seemed like an idea of to get out of marrying Robert became a prison. This perspective just doesn't sit right with me, and I wanted to get your opinion on their relationship itself and how you view it, and if that age and power gap really led to Lyanna being trapped. Okay, so this is well, the facts are, first of all, that the age gap between Rhaegar and Lyanna is 7 or 8 years. When they first met, she was about 13. When the whatever you call it, the elopement or the capture or whatever, she was about 14. When she died, she was about 15. So we're looking at Rhaegar, 23-ish. So that's the age gap we're looking at. Now, is this common at the time? Was this common at the time, and is this common in George R. R. Martin's world? And the answer, sadly, is yes. It definitely was common in sort of medieval times in Western Europe for the man to be older and for the woman to be much younger than we would now consider acceptable. And this happens again and again in George R. R. Martin's world. We have Khal Drogo and Dany. She's even younger. He's even older than that. We get Marjorie and Tommen. She's much older. He's still he's a young child still. So this does happen and again. Is there a power imbalance? Yes, of course there's a power imbalance. Would she have seen this as a way out of marrying Robert Baratheon, who she doesn't want to see? Yes, absolutely. I think that's the case. But was it true love? We haven't seen it. George R. R. Martin has kept all of this back from us. So I think we can present the facts as they are, but exactly what went on with them, we have to wait for when it gets revealed in the books, or possibly in the Turning at Harrenhal stage play when that comes through. Carl Carsonock saying 12 or 13 was perfectly normal for the time. Henry VII's mother was only 12 when she was married. Anders Graham saying he was far older. She was running from a horrible marriage. He was married. That doesn't really feel like valid consent. Yep. Jewel Elson, thank you very much for the super sticker. Let's go to our Dagon Tranos saying the Azor Ahai and Nisa legend is a reversal to the Bloodstone Emperor and to the Amethyst Empress. Is this a hint that the way to beat the others is by undoing the magic that made them? Well, I think that undoing the magic that made them is definitely the way to, or brought them into existence, is a sort of slightly more vague way of saying it. I think there's still a small side. We are always focusing in on what happened with the show, where they're sort of created by the Children of the Forest. Maybe they were just brought in from another plane of existence or something. Who knows? There's a small chance of that. But yes, undoing that in some way is definitely the solution, rather than trying to kill them all. The answer to this is not going to be a big battle where the good guys just kill all the bad guys. Catherine Furseth saying, hi Robert, I have recently read Fire and Blood, and one thing that struck me is the mentions of feet disappearing. We hear that Laris Strong wished to be separated from his club foot after his execution and buried separately, but Fire and Blood tells us, but before that could be done, it disappears. Mushroom tells us it was stolen and sold to some sorcerer who used it in the casting of his spells. The self-same tale is told of the foot torn off Prince Joffrey's leg in Fleabottom, which makes the veracity of both suspect, unless we are meant to believe that all feet are possessed of malign powers. I'm sure that George R. R. Martin is having his fun with us here, but I can't stop thinking about any possible connection to Dunk's foot having a prominent, if unclear, role to play in that story. Could it be that Dunk's foot actually does something at Summerhall that could be seen as malign? Any thoughts? Well, the foot thing is interesting. I don't think, I mean, when the maesters say, well, this is clearly nonsense, the idea this could be used for magic, then we shouldn't put too much weight on what the maesters say. It's entirely possible that something was used for magic, and why not a foot? But is there a link here to Dunk? I mean, his is the most famous foot in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. Will he do something malign with it? I don't think so. I don't think that's what this hint is here. I think the hint is that feet can be magically important, and he will use his foot. This is my take. If you've not seen this before, then I've argued it various times, and I'm not alone. His foot is saved effectively by the dead to the heir to the Iron Throne, by the death of the heir to the Iron Throne, and then he spends a long time pondering what value is my foot? How does my foot measure up to the life of the heir to the Iron Throne? Which makes people wonder whether his death at Summerhall many years later will come with him saving the life of the heir to the Iron Throne using his foot, bringing the story round in full circle. Now, I think, if anything, this is just showing that a foot can be magical, not that it will be necessarily malign magic. E. Marty saying, do you believe that Fire and Blood foreshadows events at the end of A Song of Ice and Fire? If so, what about Tyrion going to Braavos instead of Dany, like Septon Bath did? Does Fire and Blood foreshadow events at the end of A Song of Ice and Fire? I mean, I think that there are bits within Fire and Blood that will have echoes. I don't think foreshadowing is quite the right way, but I think there are definitely going to be echoes. I've already mentioned higher in the stream, I talked about the way that Cersei will run King's Landing. I think will be very reminiscent of the way that Rhaenyra ran King's Landing. I love the idea. I don't know whether it's going to happen or not, but I love the idea that this battle above the God's Eye Lake, someone on Dragonback against someone else on Dragonback, that might get replicated by a similar battle in The Song of Ice and Fire. Perhaps Jon on Rhaegal versus Euron on Viserion. This would very much match up with the Aemond one eye, Euron with his one eye kind of feel that we've got. So I think there are possible echoes, definitely, that are going to be there. Do I think that Tyrion might go to Braavos instead of Dany, like Septon Bath? Only if Dany in Fire and Blood to negotiate go to Braavos at the moment, and I think the answer is she doesn't. Once she's dealt with the Dothraki, the implication is she's going to come back to Marine, loaded on board ships, and the ships are negotiate with. So at the moment, no, there's no particular thing for her to be negotiating with them about, only if Bravos suddenly come to the fore and take a much more active role in what's going on. Well, I think that'd be needed. Andrew Kay also coming up with a good point. I don't want to labour the Rhaegar Lyanna bit too much because I think that we simply don't know. But Andrew Kay's saying, if she was manipulated, wouldn't Ned's thoughts about Rhaegar be similar to Robert Baratheon's hate or blaming him? And he clearly doesn't. He seems to hold Rhaegar in really quite high regard, actually. So I think that's evidence against it. Catherine Furseth saying, Dany rides Drogon twice, once out of the fighting pit, and secondly when she summons Drogon to take her away after having spotted a Dothraki scout in the Dothraki Sea in her very last chapter in Dance with Dragons. It's almost the last thing that happens to her in the story that we have so far. Do you see any change in Dany's control of Drogon in these two instances? It seems to me that she has somewhat more control of him before and during the later flight. Yes, so let's have a quick flick to this. I'll just quickly read this out. So she climbs on back. She says, her bare legs tightened around the dragon's neck. She kicked him, and Drogon threw himself into the sky. Her whip was gone, so she used her hands and feet, and turned him north by east, the way the scout had gone. Drogon went willingly enough. Perhaps he smelt the rider's fear. So that is an easier ride. When she first gets on top of Drogon, she doesn't know how to control Drogon. Drogon's just flying off into the Dothraki Sea. She's trying lots of different things. She's thinking, well, I'm sure the ancient Valyrians had magical horns by which they could control their dragons, all of this kind of stuff. There, she does seem to be almost like riding a horse. She's like using her knees and those hands and trying to guide it, and Drogon seems to be going where Drogon wants to go. Now, the question is, what has changed? Is this Dany more relaxed, more used to it? Has a bond with Drogon grown? All of those things might well be true. She thinks, because Drogon then heads off and she can look down and she can see some patches of scorched earth and she goes, oh, he's been this way before. So maybe that's easier. Maybe that's why he's happy to go this way, because he's seen it. So yes, the implication is that it is easier. This last chapter, the last couple of chapters of Dany, are a turning point for her, where she is. Quaithe is talking to her again. The dragons remember who you are, Daenerys. The dragons know who you are. You're a Targaryen. You're about fire and blood. You're about conquest. And this, she starts to embrace it. In fact, actually, I'll see whether I can find it because it's a wonderful bit of sort of imagery. Language he uses here. So she waits. She lands. She waits. Her dragon is now eating a Dothraki. Basically, she doesn't even think about it, other than to be sort of saying, what would my noble husband think if he could see me now? But then we get this. She said, we read, as the western sky turned the color of a blood bruise, she heard the sound of approaching horses. Dany rose, wiped her hands on her ragged undertunic, and went to stand beside her dragon. That was how Carl Jacko found her when 100 mounted warriors emerged from the drifting smoke. So what we have, that's the last bit we hear. That's the end of it, with this blood bruise in the western sky, which means death and blood. And she's there standing waiting, facing her opposition next to her dragon. This is a very different feel to the Dany that we had for most of that book, when she was trying to compromise with the people of Meereen, when she was giving up things one after another. Oh, my dragons are eating your sheep. Well, I'll lock them up in one of your pyramids. Oh, I don't like your fighting pits, but if you insist, then we will open them. Oh, what's the best way of running this country, of ruling here? Well, maybe I should marry one of your own, not the person that I love. That kind of compromise seems to have gone. So can Drogon recognize that? It's possible, because the bond does seem to go two ways. Martin S. How could the Children of the Forest believe that unleashing what is essentially an undead scourge was a good idea? Also, my previous super chat. Did I miss one of your super chats? I do apologize. Moderators, is there any chance you could flick back and find that one and then flag it up to me? I'd appreciate that. But on this one, in terms of how could they believe that unleashing what is essentially an undead scourge was a good idea? Well, we don't know, but here's the thinking. Here's the best idea that we have so far. The Children of the Forest were being wiped out. This was an existential matter for them. Humans, the first men, sweeping across the continent. They're killing off their weirwood trees, which are not just random trees that they liked. This is the spirits of their ancestors living through those trees. And the first men were moving upwards and upwards and upwards. And the Children of the Forest were going to die. And they try drastic things. They try stopping them from coming in. The Hammer of the Waters, allegedly, we get this great spell breaking the land bridge between Essos and Westeros. It doesn't matter. Humans keep coming. They just multiply, and more of them come. They try perhaps to do it again at the neck. It fails miserably. What are they going to do? How on earth are they going to survive? Because these humans, they've got these metal swords, and the Children of the Forest have just got this dragon glass, which is very brittle. They can't catch up technologically. They can't catch up with the numbers of them. And eventually, the Children of the Forest are going to die. So that's the situation they're faced with. They think that they've tried everything they possibly can do. They need something on their side in this battle. This is where the others come in. The others use humanity's strength against them. They are stronger than humans, but also the numbers of humans start to work against them. You kill a human, it then comes onto your side. So the balance of power shifts, and the others are then stronger than humanity. But you're such a clever child of the forest. You've put in your own little way, your own little backdoor into this, so that you can make sure that you can always be protected. You know how to get rid of them. You actually somehow make sure that they are vulnerable to the thing that you use, dragonglass, not the thing that humans use. So that's how they could have thought this through, that this was perhaps a good idea. And obviously, as with all of these things, it got a bit out of hand. So that's the basic thinking, is that they created an enemy for humanity, which would use humanity's strengths against it, but its weak point would be the thing that you're strongest at. See Carl Carsnock's chat above. Okay, so Martin S. How powerful? This was Martin S.'s other super chat. This is a Lord of the Rings question. How powerful do you think the Valar would come off with late 20th century technology? I tend to believe that they would still be very potent, like top superheroes in that genre. Well, yes, I absolutely. So the Valar in Tolkien's world can reshape the world itself. Basically, this is how powerful they are. So yes, they would be still incredible. They're the pantheon of gods. It's like saying, how powerful would the Greek gods be in today's world? They would be hugely powerful, but and also immortal. I don't think there's it's not a time specific thing. They come from outside time into time, and they have powers to manage and rule everything in every aspect of life. Superheroes, but incredibly powerful ones. Question from Otis 480. I'm reading A Clash of Kings and have two questions about it. Do we have any information on why Gendry was sent to the wall? Clearly, he should be safe from Cersei's investigations into Robert's bastards, but who convinced his master of letting him go? Well, to answer that one, this is Varys. And Varys knew where all of Robert Baratheon's bastards were. He was the person who went to Tobbo Mott and paid him to let his apprentice go. The implication is that Varys put him there as an apprentice in the first place, so paid him to let his apprentice go and put him into the band going up to the Night's Watch. Now, this is... it prompts the question, why did Varys do that? Well, he seems to be playing many levels. Part of it is probably just trying to protect the innocent. Varys is a very manipulative person behind the scenes and can be very deadly, but he does seem to genuinely care about the innocent. And Gendry in the books is incredibly innocent. He doesn't know who he is. He's got no idea who he is. So why not let him go? And if he goes up to the wall, if he makes it up to the wall, then great. He's not a problem for anyone, because if you're up at the wall, you give up all your claims anyway. So I think that's what was going on. But the short answer is Varys. The second question is about Tyrion and Myrcella. When Tyrion sent her to Dorne, was he aware of the Dornish inheritance laws? He was aware that Joffrey's reign may not be for long, so there was a high likelihood of a succession crisis after Joffrey's death if Myrcella is in Dorne and is supposed to marry the Prince of Dorne. This might have even have been intended by Tyrion as a special thanks to his loving family. Well, I mean, I read that relatively recently. I mean, he's certainly not unaware of it. He knows, he's very well read. He understands Dornish succession laws. He does, interestingly, much later in the story, he does think about the idea of putting Myrcella onto the Iron Throne. So it's not outside of his thought process, but at the same time, he is not doing it in order to undermine the Targaryens. The Targaryens, his family. He's doing there to actually strengthen them, because what he is doing is trying to. Dorne has, after Robert's rebellion, Dorne pulled away. It used to be right at the center of what was going on in the Kingsguard, on the small council, obviously married to the heir to the throne, but then they pulled away. Doran just pulled back into Dorne, and they're just thinking up all of these plots about how to get back into the power, but they're not doing much. Tyrion realized that the Lannisters, although, well, at the time, there were threats everywhere. There was 2 Baratheon threats. There's the Iron Islands. There's Robb Stark. They needed allies. He could get Dorne back on side, he thought, giving them a peace offering with saying that they can come, they can join the small council, and he will give them what the revenge, basically, he says, the revenge that they want. The clear implication is, you can have the mountain. I will hand them over to you. So the other part of that, in order for them to know that this isn't a trap, was to send Myrcella over there and basically try and cut a deal with her. Tyrion thought this was necessary for the survival of the Lannister regime. Later on, he does have thoughts about this maybe he can use it for his own advantage, but at the time, no, he was fighting for them. Because Tyrion's actually, a small digression about Tyrion's psychology here. I've got a video coming out at some point soon, which is about, is Tyrion the bad guy? Because it's a question George R. R. Martin sort of asked at a point. But Tyrion is, at this point in A Clash of Kings, he's actually the most bought into House Lannister he has been probably in his entire life. Because he spent all this time being ignored, hated by all his family, with the exception of Jaime. And then suddenly his father, Tywin, says, I want you to go off. Here's a position of great responsibility. You can be acting Hand of the King. And he, for the first time, he actually thinks, I've been recognized for who I am. Because Tywin could have said, okay, so Joffrey's clearly king, but Cersei is, she's going to be there as his mother, effectively ruling him. But Tywin clearly saw what Cersei was like and clearly saw what Tyrion was like and decided that Tyrion should be put in a position of authority over her. He was the most bought in. That doesn't mean he liked Joffrey, doesn't mean he liked Cersei, but he was the most bought into Team Lannister at any point there. It's when we get to book 3 that this all breaks down, one thing after another. Everything breaks down. He loses his position of authority. He gets framed for murder. He loses the people that he thought that he could trust. All these things, one after another. His decisions start getting undone. Pycelle, he's sent to the Black Cells. Pycelle comes back. He gets framed for murder. His girlfriend, effectively Shay, testifies against him and betrays him, one after another. Then we get to Jaime at the very end. Jaime admitting his guilt in something which Tyrion hadn't realized that he was guilty for. One after another, all of these things happen. But at the time that Tyrion sent off Myrcella is the moment he's most engaged in Team Lannister. Martin S. saying, although I do agree with Tyrion, what prevented Janos Slynt from simply walking back to King's Landing when Tyrion did not have the king or queen regent behind him in sending Janos to the wall? Because the Tyrion had the authority of being the hand of the king. Joffrey was not yet basically old enough to be king. Cersei was her power derived from him. Tyrion's power derived from Tywin. So if Tyrion did something, that was because Tywin had authorized him to do that. So he had not got the... Janos Slynt could have gone back, at which point he would then be a deserter, and he'd also gone against the king's own instruction. The hand of the king speaks on behalf of the king. So, that's why not. Question from Delofan saying, thank you for all you did. Thank you. Always impressed with your ability to not only find excellent insights in your scripted videos, but also your thoughtfulness and knowledge when speaking extemporaneously live. That's a great word. Well, thank you very much. It was your first super chat as well, so thank you. I hugely appreciate it. What about a question from... actually, what I think I might do today is I'm going to make this one an open Q&A just about A Song of Ice and Fire. Otherwise, I could carry on that. I've got lots of questions still to go through. And then next week, I'll do open Q&A about Lord of the Rings and other stuff as well. So I think that's what I'll probably do, because I've been talking for 3 hours. As I say, I've been just got back from traveling, so I'm a little bit tired. But I've got another good few questions to be getting on with. Naberius saying, "Hi Robert, I've heard you speak of the men of the north, old, lame, or feeble, usually, who come winter go out into the elements to just die. Something about this hasn't sat well with me. From what I've seen and heard, two of the most prominent traits of Northerners are that they are hearty, and maybe more important for this question, hard-headed or stubborn. For them to essentially give up and go crawl into a hole in the snow to die, it just feels off to me. Why don't they head south and use their experience dealing with the more harsh northern winters to help someone in central or southern Westeros prepare and cope with what would be mild winter conditions for the north, but possibly a challenge for the southerners? Or have they done this? Thank you. Right, so good question. I mean, the first one is, the scene setting, for those who don't know what we're talking about, is when we get long, hard winters in the north, where we read in the World of Ice and Fire that sometimes Northerners, older Northerners, might take a look round their castle, hold fast or whatever, have a look at what provisions they've got to be getting their way through the winter and think, it's not going to survive. We're not all going to survive this. And then they head off out into the winter themselves, sacrificing themselves to allow the rest of the people in their family group or whatever it is to survive the winter. So we're told that happens. So the first thing to say is that this is not just going out, crawling into a hole and giving up. This is people who say, okay, you lot, I'm saving. You're going to be okay. I'm going to head out and I'm going to try and make my own way. Maybe they head off and maybe they find some shelter. Maybe they find some source of food and maybe they survive. And some do come back. It's not just like they go off and say, well, that's it, I'm dead. But they consider themselves dead. Now, do they always do this? No. On short winters, no. It's only if they genuinely think that them leaving will save the lives of the children. So this is actually an honourable act for the Northerners. Now, why don't they sort of go somewhere and help other people? Well, what we have, Fire and Blood is a classic example. We have during the Dance of the Dragons, it's winter up north. And so when we get the Northerners coming south, the Winter Wolves, this is who they are. This is the group of soldiers that the Starks have called together and said, well, you would otherwise head out into the snow to try and protect the rest of your family, but we're going to go south and we're going to fight a few battles. So you already count yourselves effectively as a dead, so we'll head on down. And this created a problem, incidentally, because when they got all the way down to King's Landing, the war was pretty much petering out by this point. It was within a few sort of messages and handshakes of this can all end. But they were all ready for war. And they were all thinking, well, we're already dead, so we might as well go off and fight someone. Now, that caused a problem because they had to go to the powers that be in the south had to go behind the Northerners' backs to create a peace, to show them surrenders from other people before they would accept that they weren't going to fight. So they were all just going to go off, well, let's go and attack Casterly Rock. Why not? So they do sometimes head off. Those who were there went all the way down to the south and they survived. A lot of them did end up marrying widows in the south. And they actually had these kind of like wedding fairs in villages in the Riverlands. And so the Northerners would go up there and then the villagers would come out and say, okay, so that person's lost their husband, that person's lost their husband, that person lost their husband. Who wants to match up? So that is a thing. But further back before that, why wouldn't Northerners head to the south to help the people in the south? Because the north was a separate country and the south had a history of trying to attack it at times, different parts of the south. And so they might head a bit south, but they're not just going to go in and like magnanimously go and help people sort of south of the neck. That's not really how it worked. Commander Ray saying, "Hi Robert, with the way George writes, often leading to characters going in directions he didn't expect, do you think the ending to the story will diverge away from the show's final season? And can you discuss some of the ways it will change or stay the same, in particular how John's story plays out?" Now, I'm gonna give a quote here from now, who is it? Diana Gabaldon, who I've not really read her writing, but she's the person who wrote and now my mind's gone blank. Not Highlander. You know the story. There's a TV show. Somebody, Outlander. There we go. Andrew K. I knew somebody would be able to help me. So she wrote Outlander, and she's friends with George R. R. Martin. And this is a different perspective, I think, on what we've heard so far in terms of how the books are going to be different to the TV show. And this is what she said. "Poor George. I feel very sorry for him. What happened is that his show caught up with him, and he then met with the showrunners and he told them what he was planning to do with the book so that they could then write accordingly. Only they didn't write accordingly. They took his stuff and distorted it and wrote their own ending, which wasn't at all what he had in mind. But, and this is the interesting bit, but used all the elements that he told them." So this is something George R. R. Martin has said in different ways. He said back at the time, he said the story would be the big beats of the story would be the same. But he's emphasized a lot recently how there are going to be lots of big differences, partly because he's got lots of different characters and plot lines that aren't there in the original. Phagon is there. Euron's a very different character. We've got lots of different plot lines going on in the books that did not happen on the show. But to simply say that the show ending is going to be nothing like the books is misleading. What he says is the big beats will be the same. What his friend says is that they distorted what he gave them and wrote their own ending, but used all the elements that he told them. So we will see echoes when we get the books. Fingers crossed. When we get the books, we will be able to look at the show and see echoes, is the kind of feeling we've got here. The elements that are there in the books are there on the show, but they did different things with them. Now, what do I mean by that? An example of a thing which I don't think we can say this is definitely going to happen yet, but it feels right from where we are in the books. I could well imagine that George R. R. Martin said to the showrunners, Jaime and Cersei. Jaime ends up going back to Cersei and they die together. Because they entered this world together, they will leave this world together. That's something both of them have thought at different points in the books. And that kind of makes some sense story-wise. Will they die by falling masonry? Probably not. But probably that's how they will die together in King's Landing. That kind of makes sense. Will Jaime kill Euron? Well, perhaps. If Euron has teamed up with Cersei and Jaime sees that as his way to get back to Cersei, perhaps he will be the one to kill Euron. Makes sense. Will it be just one-on-one fight underneath the Red Keep as Jaime gets off of a boat? Almost certainly not, I would have thought. But the big beats, the main elements will be there. So that's the kind of feel. Now, how does this, you ask specifically about John? We get some things that I think we can be reasonably confident on. The further we go forward, then the less confident that we can get. So I think that he will come back from the dead, but I think that the clear difference is that it's not that he has died and then gets resurrected by Melisandre. He wogs into ghost and then gets pulled back into his own body. There's foreshadowing for that in the books. That I think will leave him more wolfish. There's a lot of foreshadowing for that. Interpret more wolfish in whichever way you wish, but I think that there's a clear suggestion that that's what's going to be happening with him. I think that there's a reasonable chance that he will indeed reclaim Winterfell as Robb's heir. That's just by book logic. That seems quite logical. He was going to go back to Winterfell. That was the thing he was wanting to do just before he got killed. So that's clearly on his mind, to go back to Winterfell. When he gets there, all of the people on the winning side are wanting to reinstate the Starks there. So it's a matter of which Stark are you going to go with? Well, Arya's not back yet. I think there's a fair chance that Rickon may well die. And even if he doesn't, he's still a very young child, and they won't want a very young child as their king. Sansa is going to be suspect for many people because she's married to a Lannister. And then Bran also isn't back. And when he does come back, he's going to feel very different. Jon, all the hints are that Jon was legitimized by Robb in Robb's will. And as a result, I think there's a fair chance that he might then end up as being king of the North. He will almost certainly need Dragonglass. He'll hear about everything that happened with Sam, and he will say, okay, we need Dragonglass. There are lots of hints that maybe he and Dany will fall in love. I don't know how much time there is left in the story in that, but that seems reasonably fair. I think he will get revealed as a Targaryen, Rhaegar's son. How that will happen, we don't know, but I think that is very strongly foreshadowed. So all of this up to this point, it's the same big beats of the story, but not the same way that this is being revealed. Will he kill Dany? I mean, I did a video well before season 8 that I pulled out. I think I even called it "Will Jon Kill Dany?" because I think there's enough in the books to say that it's possible. Will he end up going north? Yeah, I think he probably will. So all of this is, I think, where we're going to get, when you compare the book and the show, is that the sort of the statement on what will happen at the end of this story. Bran will become king. Okay, maybe that's what's going to happen, but is it going to happen in the way that we saw it on the show? Almost certainly not. Jon will head north at the end, almost certainly, but in the same way, no. Samantha Drake, thank you very much for the super chat. I didn't see a question attached to that. Do let me know if there was a question attached to that. Otherwise, here we go. I see this now. First time asking a question. Well, welcome. I was surprised how short a time the Targs were in power, especially compared to the other ruling houses. Do you think there will be any payoff for this in the narrative? So the Targaryens were in power in Westeros for about 300 years. That's obviously the same as the two ruling houses, the Tullys and the Baratheons, that they put in place, but a lot less than the other ruling houses. Is there going to be any payoff for that? I mean, I don't know what a payoff would be for the fact that they weren't there long, but I think that this does play into the fact that although there are people who view the Targaryens as being the rightful rulers of the Seven Kingdoms, when Dany arrives in Westeros, the fact that she's a Targaryen on its own will not mean that she's warmly welcomed, because she will come appearing like a foreign invader from Essos. She's never set foot on mainland Westeros. She's probably got a really thick foreign accent by this point that we don't hear about, but she's going to have Dothraki at her back. She's going to have Unsullied there. She's going to have some sellsword companies, all from Essos. She's going to have as an advisor a red priest. This is not what looks like a returning Westerosi monarch. Let's go to a question from Commander Ray saying, Robert, we know Ned's endgame move was getting Robert Baratheon on side as he would have destroyed the Lannisters. I want to get your thoughts on how Ned could have achieved his goal without losing his honor and before Robert got aboard. And you spelled that Boared. I see what you did there. I don't think that we can actually talk about Ned personally. I don't think we can talk about Ned as having this kind of endgame, great strategic narrative going on in his head. That doesn't seem to be, when we read his chapters, that's not what we see. We see him desperately trying to sort of stay alive and work out what's going on in King's Landing. And then he knows his only real ally is Robert Baratheon. But what's his end game? Yeah, he would, once he's discovered it, then he will tell Robert, not because he's there trying to win the Game of Thrones, but because this is his friend and he thinks that his friend deserves to know. Now, he did have an opportunity to launch a coup. Renly gave him an opportunity. Basically, Renly said, I know what you're doing. Stannis is already gone. But I could get the Tyrells on board. If we launch a coup tonight, then we can probably capture Joffrey and put you in charge as sort of king regent or regent to the king, as well as hand of the king, and you could rule. And he's like, no. I mean, and it would have been from some perspectives, a fair play for him to make. Certainly the kind of thing that the Lannisters would have made. He thought he was in the right. He thought that Joffrey should not be king. And so he just said, that's not what I'm doing. I don't think Joffrey should be king. So Ned's hard-headedness was the thing which was preventing him. He didn't have a strategic mind, bless him. Evan saying, no question, just thanks. You inspired me to read the books and they're incredible. Also listening to the audiobooks and they're just as good. R.I.P. Roy Dotrice. Well, thank you so much. And it warms my heart when people tell me that they are reading the books because of me. It's the books are so much bigger than the TV show. There's so much extra depth, so many extra layers. That's fantastic. And if I can play my small part in sort of pushing people in that direction, then I'm very happy. Callie Summers, dark tinfoil. Okay, Tommen is the Valonqar. His death pushes Cersei over the edge. She drinks the strangler to die like Joffrey, giving it to Jaime too. Yeah, that's dark. I mean, so the Valonqar is the younger brother or sister, which would fit Tommen, but it also fits huge amounts of the rest of the cast of A Song of Ice and Fire. She drinks the strangler to die like Joffrey. Would she be committing suicide? I personally think that no, she will just lose a part. If her children all die, she just loses a part of her soul, and this is when she starts working with Euron. That's my general take. And she would give it to Jaime too. Yeah, it's a nice idea. I know you love your tinfoil ideas. I think it's a nice idea. Does sort of work prophecy-wise. It also works in the way that George R. R. Martin likes to turn prophecies on their head. But I think she's got more of a role after that. Let's go to Commander Ray, another question saying, Varys claims when he kills Kevin Lannister that he has been plotting to put Aegon on the throne. Do you think the move to help Viserys and Dany was a ploy to remove them from the picture, as he was happy to commit to killing Dany when he could have said he is actively trying but not really? I guess my real question is, who is Varys' loyalty really? I will do a full Varys video, I promise, at some point in the next few weeks. But the initial plan was to persuade Viserys to marry off Dany to Khal Drogo, which would get the Dothraki on Viserys' side. Viserys would then launch his invasion of the Seven Kingdoms. They would go through and destroy the opposition. However, people would see that Viserys was a terrible king. This is when they would unveil Fagon and go, but we have another Targaryen for you, and then he would take over. This then got shifted and changed over time. There's the idea maybe he could marry Dany, but things obviously changed when Dany got dragons. Maybe he could marry Dany and they could be ruling side by side like Jaehaerys and Alysanne. That's the idea, but it's always to get him onto the throne. Who is Varys really loyal to? Well, he's loyal to his own plan and to his idea of what good ruling of the Seven Kingdoms would look like. Now, he would think that he is there on the side of the small folk. He is there on the side of trying to look after people. I think there is an element of that to it, but he's ultimately loyal to his own plan with Illyrio. Question from Naberios. For setup, we have 2 to 3 mythical characters involved in helping end the original Long Night. They have different names based on the origin location, but it seems most fans believe these myths to be referring to the same person, or possibly a very small group of people. This is so like the last hero, Azor Ahai. Most fans would say this is actually just a monomyth, one person who did this thing, but he gets remembered in different ways in different parts of the world. Second, we know that George R.R. Martin originally planned on having Dany spend 5 years in Asshai. Do you think it's possible that Dany, once having learned what she could, and possibly while working to build her forces to move west, comes to see, or more fully understand, that there is a threat from the others coming, but not to Westeros, but right where she is in Essos, and she decides to stay to battle them there, leaving someone, probably Jon, to inhabit the role of Westeros' version of the ancient hero. Therefore, turning that expectation that these myths were actually the same story from 2 different lands on its head a bit by actually having 2 different characters or groups fulfilling the roles of the 2 different legends in 2 different locations. Well, I think this is a really interesting idea. So there's, if you dig into the World of Ice and Fire and the history we've got there, you will see far off to the east, there's lots of these places like Yee. There are all these legends of the first Long Night, which did seem to be across the entire planet. This wasn't just a Westeros thing, and there are certainly a lot of similarities with the 5 forts, which are up and sort of to the far east, to the northeast of Yee, which are there kind of protecting them from invasion, it would appear, in the same way that the wall is. So could this have been George R.R. Martin's initial plan, that Dany should actually go east and then protect the east? I don't think so. I think that the Quaithe prophecies were to go west, you must go east. So I think his idea was that she would go east, she would learn lots of this information, she would learn about Azor Ahai, she would learn about how to ride her dragon, and she would learn what she has to do to be fulfilling her part in this prophecy that Aegon had, etc., etc., and then she would head west. So that, I think, was his original plan. He cut out that 5-year time jump, which he'd originally had, and then he had to work out, well, how does Dany get this knowledge anyway? And Quaithe is certainly giving her some, but we have characters like Marwyn, like Mokoro, who both will be coming with very similar bits of information to her. Tyrion is going to be there to be read. He's sort of very subtly hinted. If you remember, all the way back at the beginning of the story, she got married to Khal Drogo, and Jorah gave her this little pile of books about your homeland. And somebody once in a Q&A asked, has she ever read those books? And he goes, well, she's not much of a reader. But do you know who is? Tyrion. And do you know who's coming her direction? Tyrion. So whatever's in those books, and we don't really know what's in those books, but Tyrion will read that. He also has the dragon knowledge, and he will pass information to her. Maura will pass information to her. Marwyn will pass information to her, and Marwyn has been all the way over to Ashai. Don't forget, she will get all the information she needs, but not from Ashai itself. And I think that this idea is that she will still be heading west. She's not going to be staying east. George R. R. Martin has basically told us, somebody asked, will we ever see Ashai, or will we ever go to Ashai in the story? And he said, I paraphrase, but he said, you may see it in a flashback or a vision or something like that, but not in actual characters going there. So no, I think it's a really good idea, but I don't think that's what is going on. Corvus Corax, or Corax, sorry, saying, hey there, Robert and Dan, adding 2 spaniel dogs to the A Song of Ice and Fire community this weekend. Baylor Breaksticks and Rowan Noy. Great names. Welcome to your 2 dogs. I'm sure they will have a wonderful and loving home. Anyway, I was just introduced to an old bit of gossip that Martin mentioned to Diana Gabaldon, who we were talking about earlier, the writer of Outlander, that he killed off a character he needed. Sorry for the old question, but what are your speculations on who this may be? Yeah, so I dug through it. This resurfaced relatively recently. I don't know why. Somebody must have found it on the internet. This is her doing a Q&A about her books, and it's not clear what she was asked, but she then says, yeah, I was having lunch or dinner with George R. R. Martin, and as part, and I asked him, how are you getting on with the book? And he said, have you ever killed off a character that you later discovered that you needed? And she basically said, yeah, but you can write around it. That's not quite George R. R. Martin's style, sadly. Now, this was, I think it was 2015, maybe, when that happened. So by this point, he will have been writing The Winds of Winter for a few years. Now, the question has come up, who is this character? George R. R. Martin, perhaps he shouldn't have revealed that information, but George R. R. Martin, clearly, he was struggling. She was asking him about writing The Winds of Winter, and he was struggling because he killed off a character that he now thinks he needs. Who is that character? Well, we've talked about this a few times over the last few weeks. One possible option is Maester Aemon, in which case the answer is that he's sort of tried to solve it, because Maester Aemon, what would be the point of Maester Aemon surviving? It would be because he has a lot of knowledge and information to pass on to Dany. But George R. R. Martin seems to have worked that out by Aemon dies, but Marwyn takes over and heads over there. He's got a lot of information for her as well. My instinct, and it's a more boring answer than picking out characters who have already died, is my boring answer is perhaps it's a character who dies at the beginning of The Winds of Winter that we just don't know about yet. And that's why, in that context, why she's saying, how was Winds of Winter going? I've killed off a character that I need later in the book. Who could this be? Well, one example, I'm not saying this is who it is, but one example is, what happens if he kills off Barristan Selmy? And that's entirely within the realms of possibility, because the first action of the book is this big battle, and Barristan Selmy, we know he heads out on a charge against the enemy catapults. He's being all heroic, but he's old now. If he died, what would happen then? Well, I suspect, to start with, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. I suspect that the battle would still end the way that the battle ends. But would a few chapters down the line, when Dany returns, is there some information that Barristan needs to give her that nobody else can? Because he's the only one who was around back in the day. Maybe he needs to give some information out. I'm not saying it is Barristan Selmy, but I'm saying that is the kind of thing that could definitely happen, because George R. R. Martin could follow down and write 8, 9, 10 chapters and then realize that actually he shouldn't have killed that character all the way back there. And we know that what that means he will do is he will put those chapters to one side and then he'll start again, which would obviously be a part of why it's taking so long to write The Winds of Winter. And so when he says, have you ever killed off a character you know that you discover later that you still needed, that is him perhaps saying, at the beginning of the story, I killed off someone. I wrote a whole load of stuff, and now I've got to go back and rewrite that so I don't kill him. It's possible. But do let me know. I'd be interested actually in the chat. Do let me know if you think it's a character that has died already in the story. Who do you think he might be talking about here? Because I find this quite hard to think of who he desperately needs, not just like a random, oh, that'd be an interesting character to have, but who does he desperately need to be there? Luna Cascade, does Daemon really care about the small folk? He told Rhaenyra it was necessary. How does he demonstrate that he cares? So this is House of the Dragon. And he gives her a little, it's that scene when they go down into Flea Bottom, and it all ends a little bit weird, but he seems to give her two messages there. If you go back and watch it, he's, first of all, she's like kind of dismissive of why are we here? Why do we care about what's happening with all these small folk? And he's saying, well, when you rule, you'll have to care about all of these people. And believe me, it's really important. You'll know what's really going on in your city, things like that, which makes it sound like he cares. But then the second lesson that he seems to be giving her is she's a Targaryen. She should just do what she wants. Now, there's a bit of a tension here, perhaps, between these two situations. But I think the way through it is he cares about the small folk pragmatically. It's not that he actually genuinely goes there and his heart bleeds for all these people who are living in poverty. No, he's thinking, as a Targaryen, we need to be strong rulers. And you can't be a strong ruler unless you understand your people. So I think that's what was going on there. It wasn't him being this incredibly caring person. He does not come across as an incredibly caring person. I think this was him trying to give leadership lessons. Let's have a quick flick through. Some people are saying, Caius Ballerina is saying Geryon Lannister. That's an interesting possibility. That was Joffrey's. That was Tyrion's favorite uncle. Caius Ballerina is saying Joffrey. I think he's okay with killing off Joffrey. I'm pretty sure that was in his mind for quite some time. Andrew K pointing out the House of the Dragon Daemon is much softer than the text one. I would agree 100%. Carl Karsnark wondering whether it's Maester Aemon who's the person who died. Igreet Weirwood saying Beric Dondarrion. Yeah, that's possible. Waymar Royce says Caius Ballerina. That really is quite early on in the story when he dies. Will Benjen. Well, we haven't got proof that Benjen is dead. Rourke suggests Carl Karsnark, and as Graham saying Micah. No, I think Micah was definitely needed. Caius Ballerina saying that these are joke answers. Thank you. My apologies. I take these things seriously too much. So let's go with. I've got one more question from my patrons. I'll say what I'm going to do this time. I will. Just to make this the focus on A Song of Ice and Fire, open Q&A, then I'll do next week, I will do an open Q&A about Lord of the Rings. Maura Lee saying, can you talk about the lyrics of Jenny's song and why do you think the Woods Witch loved this song? Well, this is a really interesting question. So we remember Jenny's song from Game of Thrones that... we had that great version from France the Machine. Also, Pod sang a beautiful version of it. Now, I'll give the story and then I'll talk about the song itself. So this is way back. Aegon V, Egg, is king. His eldest son, Duncan, Duncan Targaryen, is due to be married to the daughter of Lord Baratheon, but then he heads off to a place called Old Stones, which is a very sort of old magic kind of place. And there he meets, it would appear, this woman called Jenny, who he falls madly in love with, and decides to marry. And she seems to be, I mean, I think the maesters called her simple, which is often shorthand for maybe a bit magical. She had her best friend was this woods witch who accompanied her down to King's Landing, gave a prophecy about the line of the prince that was promised. And then this caused all kinds of political ructions, him breaking his engagement to marry this commoner, effectively. But marry her he did, and he seemed to have been very happy. But then Summerhall happened, and he definitely died. The clear implication is that she definitely died. Summerhall burnt to the ground. Lots of other people died. The clear suggestion is that the Woods Witch did not die. Jenny's best friend. And she stayed there for a very long time. And eventually we meet her in the Song of Ice and Fire as the Ghost of High Heart. And the Ghost of High Heart matches the same description as the Woods Witch, clearly seems to be Children of the Forest adjacent, and is incredibly magical and prophetic, knows immediately huge amounts about Arya, comes out with all of these prophecies of things that come true, to do with Sansa at the Purple Wedding, to do with Balon Greyjoy dying, other things. And so she asks, as her payment for doing this prophecy stuff, she asks as her payment for the minstrel to play her what she calls My Jenny's song. And this seems to be, the song plays and then she kind of leans back and she's singing it sadly and the tears are running down her face. And this song clearly means a lot to her. Now, why? Because this is a song about her friend who died. And probably, if you take a step back, probably was used and manipulated into where she was by others, Bloodraven perhaps, into the position she was, and her very happy, simple life was ruined and cut short early. As for what it says, we only have 2 lines. Yes, there was a whole song on Game of Thrones, but the rest of this was written by the showrunners. And the only 2 lines that we actually get in the books are, high in the halls of the kings who are gone, Jenny would dance with her ghosts. Now, is there more? Well, George R. R. Martin was asked this. This is a long time ago, 2020, I think it was actually 2000 he was asked, whether we will hear the rest of the song at some point. And he said this, I did write a few verses, but they were cut. He cut them. I wanted that particular song to be very haunting and evocative, and I don't think I quite achieved that. So as for what's there, we don't know. But this is clearly a song which was written about her and the tragedy that was her life, that she lived a happy life at Old Stones. She met this prince who she fell in love with and married, and then she died tragically. And that is the story. That is the song that we hear. So I would say more, but George R. R. Martin did not give us any more. Okay, so that's the last of my Song of Ice and Fire questions from my patrons. I'll have a quick flick through the chat and I'll see whether I will answer any more. Brian Moore, thank you for the super chat. I didn't see a question attached to that. Just, yeah, put it in the chat and I'll try and pick it up. Dagon Thranos saying, in Game of Thrones, Jon was resurrected and Dany was fireproof. What if in the books, Quaithe orchestrates Dany surviving a great fire to win the Dothraki, much like Bloodraven faking Jon's resurrection? Well, yes. I mean, I think there's a good chance of this. Obviously, we've got what happened on the show, but also we get a couple of things from in the books, the House of the Undying. Dany sees the crones coming out of the water and basically subjugating themselves to her. We also get this idea that she will light 3 fires, which is a fantastic line because Dany lights fires everywhere, doesn't she? Well, no, she doesn't. Her dragons light fires everywhere. So far, she's lit 1 fire. That is Khal Drogo's funeral pyre. That's the only fire she personally has lit. She will I think she will do some equivalent of burning down something in Vaes Dothrak, which will, with the fact that she's got a massive dragon on her side as well, will win over the Dothraki to her side. So, yes, there's an echo. It's, I mean, the way you put it isn't, I mean, you may well have been tongue-in-cheek. Jon was resurrected and Dany was fireproof. Dany, I don't think even in Game of Thrones, Dany wasn't fireproof. Targaryens are fire resistant rather than fireproof. And as Graham saying, hasn't George R. R. Martin said that the fireproofness came from the magic of the eggs, not entirely from Dany yet? So her surviving the fire, the funeral pyre, and the dragons dying was, and I forget the exact words he used, but it's a one-off magical, not to be repeated event. So it's magic. He doesn't often just go down to that, but that's what that was. Kalnitsky saying, I asked a question, but I don't remember what. Okay, well, if you do remember, you've got a couple of minutes. Magma Frost 13. I'd love to revisit the popular notion of Targaryen insanity now that you've gone through most of their history. Who was actually insane, or more importantly, who does history remember as insane? Well, let's get to the end of the Targaryens in the live streams, and then we'll look back. Now, the first thing I say is I don't think that George R. R. Martin is writing this that we can have a dividing line. These people are sane, those people are insane. I don't think that's where he's going. He's not that reductionist as a writer. That said, it's very clear that increasingly, as you go through the Targaryens, increasingly they started getting dragon dreams. And these dragon dreams colloquially sent them crazy. By which we mean, if we go back to what Maester Aemon says, is that he had 3 brothers, all of whom had dragon dreams, and those dreams killed all of them. Now, one of those brothers was Aerion Targaryen, who obviously had dragon dreams, dreamed that if he drank wildfire, he would turn into a dragon, and that killed him. The clear implication is that Egg will get dragon dreams, and he will think that he will be able to hatch dragons at Summerhall, and that will kill him. And we know that Deeren had lots of dragon dreams, and that effectively will have driven him to his death. So the insane thing, I think, isn't really getting to the bottom of the Targaryen issue. I think this is what I would like to do is unpick the interaction between having these dragon dreams of some kind and taking what was an already existing passion or interest or idea and just fanning the flames of it, because that seems to be what happens. Question from Brian Moore. Oh, here's from earlier. How do you think the last generation of Targaryens would have handled the North War if they remained in power and the Song of Ice and Fire was passed down accurately? So do you mean if the generation of like Viserys and Dany, if they had got this prophecy about the threat coming from the north, etc., how they would have handled the war in the north? Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, I don't know whether Viserys would have really cared that much. I think he was just so focused on what was taken from him, and I think that he would take the same, bizarrely, he would take the same approach as Stannis, which is you have to get, well, the opposite approach, I suppose, to Stannis is that he would want to have claimed the Seven Kingdoms for himself first and then worried about any external threats. Stannis decides that he wants to get the North united, but he's going to leave his claim to the rest of the Seven Kingdoms until after he's dealt with the threat from the others. Dany, I think, will get to hear these prophecies, so I think we will see what her reaction is going to be to all of this. But again, I think that her first thought is going to be reclaiming in her mind the Seven Kingdoms first. Maura Lee, thank you so much. Hi there, Maura. Thank you very much. You're saying great stream. Anders Graham saying Viserys has no Davos to make him do the right thing. This is very true. Anders Graham saying Jaehaerys was an insanely bad parent. Yeah, he's not that great. Luna Cascade asking if I've trained as an actor. I have not. Carl Karstark saying he's self-taught and 100% au natural except for all the steroids, of course. Thank you very much. Yes. That's very kind of you to say those nice words. And I think with that, I will probably start drawing this one to a close. Okay, so next week, what we will do is... actually, I realised I went through the entire stream with me like that, didn't I? Oh, well, not to worry. I think what we will do next week is we will do a Q&A again from Lord of the Rings plus The Witcher and a few other things that I've got. So if patrons, if you ask questions about those things this week, I will answer them next week. And then after that, we will get back into the finishing off this series on Targaryen rules, and we will have the long promised Blood Raven live stream. Okay, so we've got lots of videos coming up over the next few weeks. I am going to also, on this channel, I'm going to be re-uploading some chats I did with various people about Song of Ice and Fire that I think work better on this channel than they do on the other channel. Things like when I talk to learned hands, the real-life lawyers, not my lawyers, not your lawyers, but real-life lawyers who look at law in Westeros and how it works. And that was a fascinating discussion, so I'm going to be uploading that one onto this channel, and I'm going to do a few of those other ones, get that over here for the next. So there will be regular videos coming out on this channel over the course of the next few weeks, as well as on the main channel as well. If you are a follower of my third channel, I shall now call it The Well Told Tale. If you didn't know about this, The Well Told Tale is a channel where I do audio narrations of what I consider to be the finest science fiction and fantasy stories ever. I'm just throwing them there for free. It's available as a podcast, also as a YouTube channel. The YouTube channel needs to do a little bit of catching up, but on the YouTube channel, we're on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, which is a fantastic story. And on the podcast, we'll eventually be coming onto the YouTube channel, but on the podcast, we are starting Dracula, which I'm very excited by. So that's what's coming up on all of the different channels. I will be back same time next week. If you're watching this back a little bit later, appearing somewhere around here is a link to other live streams. If you'd like that, appearing somewhere around here is a link to my Patreon page, which is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so. That's all for this time. Take care, everyone, and I will see you again soon.